The reason you are so drained by your own life isn't because you're lazy, weak, or not putting forth enough effort. You've actually been exerting yourself more than most people could ever dream of. The real reason is this: you've been exerting your energy in the wrong direction. Every morning, you wake up and you feel as if you're swimming upstream, pushing against the current with every last bit of energy. You plan more, constrict your control further, practice every potential scenario, and fret as if fretting could stop what you are afraid of. And still, for all that striving, you don't feel safer. You feel hollower, depleted, and even farther from peace. What if I were to tell you that it wasn't your fault at all? That it's not a failure in you, but a product of how you have been conditioned to live? Like surviving is the same as thriving, and always being in control is the same as safe. That's the narrative most of us learn, and it weighs heavily on us. If you are listening today, I'd be glad if you could give me your whereabouts in the comments. Tell me where you are in this amazing, wonderful world. Because what we're going to explore here with each other is not limited by geography or situation. It doesn't matter if you're stressed in Seattle, overwhelmed in Mumbai, or simply tired of being tired in some quiet town in between. What you're about to learn applies everywhere, to everyone at any stage of life. So, for now, give yourself permission to slow down. Get comfortable. Grab a blanket, wrap it around your shoulders, find a quiet corner of your room. If you can, get down and let the heaviness of the day drop away from you for a bit. Because in the next 3 hours, you're going to find out something that very much borders on sounding impossible at first. The instant you stop struggling so hard, life itself starts to flow with you, not against you. Here's how our time together will go. In the first 15 minutes, you'll realize why your brain creates anxiety in the first place, and most importantly, how you can partner with it instead of against it. At about the 40-minute mark, we'll dive into an unexpected reality. The strongest individuals you look up to, the ones that appear immovable, aren't strong due to fighting harder, they're strong due to surrendering more profoundly. Something in you will feel lighter when we close, not because I've talked you into anything, but because you'll have remembered something you've always known, but perhaps forgotten in the den of every day. I'm not here to save you. You don't require saving. You're not broken. I just want to offer you 7 soft truths, straightforward, ageless reminders that have assisted others in halting thrashing against the current and discovering their flow once more. At times, the most extraordinary transformation does not take place through effort, but through the gentle elegance of permitting. At times, the most staggering change only occurs when we release our attempt at changing. So I ask you, are you prepared to quit swimming upstream? Fear is a seed. Plant what you want. Let me start with an anecdote. It's about Marcus, a man who had a passion for gardening. Marcus was not your run-of-the-mill gardener. He was obsessed. He scrutinized his tomato plants 3 times a day, believing that vigilance was the secret to a bountiful harvest. At sunrise, before he even had his coffee, he'd be outside examining each leaf, scouring for the slightest hint of sickness. At dusk, he'd be reading endless internet forums at 2 a.m., cross-referencing his plants to other people's gardens. He even got a weather program that reported hourly to him about storms that may never materialize. But the tragic irony is this: come midsummer, Marcus's garden had fallen apart. Not because he didn't love them, but because he loved them so much, so nervously, that his plants never stood a chance to catch a breath. One day he would drown them, watering, fearing they were too dry. The next he would bake them in the sun, fearing drowning them. He relocated them constantly, hoping to find their perfect place. His high-strung energy, his ceaseless intervention, provided just the sort of instability that his plants could not thrive in. Meanwhile, right next door, his neighbor Janet did the opposite. She watered her garden twice a week, trusted the soil, trusted the sun, trusted the natural rhythm of growth. And by the end of the season, she was harvesting basketfuls of beautiful, ripe vegetables without losing sleep, without checking a single weather app at 2 a.m. Now, you could be thinking, All right, that's a good tale about tomatoes, but how is it related to my anxiety regarding the job interview I have next week? Everything. Because your brain operates just like Marcus's garden. Every seed of thought you sow has the potential to grow. Every anxiety you water increases in strength. And all that fretful checking, that mentally scanning for what could go wrong, brings about the very instability you're working so hard to avoid. Here's the thing that nobody ever knows about fear. Fear isn't just something you feel. Fear is something you build with, too. It's a force, a seed. And when you infuse it with energy, when you feed it, it quietly starts molding your reality. Consider it. If you are afraid of losing your job, you don't simply sit with that fear. You begin to act differently at work. You doubt yourself. You second-guess yourself. You hold back from speaking up in meetings. You play it too safe, never taking those very creative risks that set you apart. Unconsciously, you start watering the very seeds of the very outcome you most fear. The same occurs in relationships. You fear your spouse will leave, and so you hold on tighter, or you fail to show up completely, fearing that being yourself will scare them away. And paradoxically, the very thing you fear becomes stronger due to the manner in which you have been nurturing it. Fear is a seed, and you're planting something every day. The question isn't whether or not you're planting, it's what you're planting. So fear says, protect yourself, don't trust too much, don't lean in. And almost before you know it, you start to pull back emotionally. You find yourself dissecting every word your partner says, interpreting secret meanings into plain language. You craft unseen tests they don't even realize they're taking, tests of loyalty, of love, of patience. And the tragic irony is this. The same behavior you think will save your relationship, protecting yourself, closing up, asking for reassurance, is the behavior that gradually drives the other person away. Fear creates the distance you were going so hard to avoid. This isn't mystical or ethereal thinking. It's not floating philosophy. It's psychology at its most fundamental level. When we are frightened, we don't merely experience fear. We think out of fear, we communicate out of fear, and we behave out of fear. And those fear-driven decisions made over time surely lead to fear-driven consequences.
There's a classic Zen parable that illustrates this perfectly. One man became so afraid of his own shadow that he chose to try and outrun it. He ran faster and faster and further and further. But whether he traveled a mile or 10 miles, the shadow was always close behind. Endangered and exhausted, he fell down, and the shadow was still there. What he never knew was that if he had merely stopped, sat under a tree and rested in silence, the shadow would have dissipated by itself. This is precisely what occurs when we attempt to outrun our fears. The more energy we invest in fighting or fleeing him, the stronger they become in our lives. They loom larger, more ominous, until they color everything we see. But the instant we refuse to flee further, when we remain still and permit ourselves to simply observe the fear without feeding it, something amazing happens. It starts to lose its hold. Fear, starved of fuel, cannot thrive. I recall Sarah, a gifted marketing director who approached me completely burned out. For several months, she had existed with the belief that her manager was contemplating laying her off. Each email, however benign, was perceived as a secret notice of termination. Each meeting, regardless of topic, was experienced as an unspoken performance review. Her solution? She worked longer hours, thinking more work would protect her. She stopped delegating, and she had to do everything herself. She second-guessed presentations she used to deliver with confident ease. Gradually, unwittingly, her natural ingenuity and acuity faded. In 3 months, her performance had actually dropped, not because she lost her skills, but because fear took them over. And this is the terrible irony. Her boss had never even thought of letting her go. To the contrary, he had been planning to give her a promotion. But when he observed her anxious, controlling attitude, when he witnessed her self-doubt, he started to doubt if she was ready to take on more responsibility. Like Marcus in his garden, Sarah's efforts to keep catastrophe at bay brought about the very circumstances that increased the chances of catastrophe. This is what the Buddha had in mind when he said that we are conditioned by our thoughts, not in some mystical imaginary way, but in the most day-to-day possible way. Our thoughts condition our feelings dictate our actions, and our actions, done day after day, form the world we experience. But here is the lovely thing, the hope within the wait. Just as Marcus might have selected other seeds to plant in his garden, so too can you select which ideas to cultivate in the soil of your mind. Your mind is the most fertile soil on earth. It does not discriminate. It will grow whatever you plant. It will cultivate fear as faithfully as it will cultivate love. It will nurture weeds of anxiety as eagerly as it will nourish flowers of peace. The soil has no preference. It will grow whatever you feed it. But you, the gardener, do have a choice. And that's not about putting positivist glue over reality or putting your head in the sand and acting like everything is great when it's not. That would be tantamount to planting roses and then trying to ignore that the weeds are growing. The weeds will grow anyway, and denial won't prevent them. What I am referring to is something much stronger, taking notice of what you are really planting. We are, most of us, unconscious gardeners. We allow every vagrant thought to take root, every passing worry to scatter its seeds, and then we're amazed when our internal landscape seems wild and unruly. Awareness is the first act of genuine gardening. Let me share another story, a simple but profound teaching. A Zen master once had 2 students helping in his garden. One student spent the entire day pulling weeds, obsessed with removing every last one, terrified they would strangle the flowers. The other student focused his energy on watering, nurturing, and tending to the flowers themselves. When the season was over, the first student's garden was uneven, with unraveled soil and damaged plants. The recurring pulling and tearing had put them under stress, with barely any space to grow. But the second student's garden was glowing, full of healthy, robust flowers, not because there were no weeds, but because the flowers had been looked after so well that the weeds simply couldn't take over. This is the heart of conscious living. Quit pulling out every fear, every doubt, every flaw. Rather, cultivate what is good, solid, and nourishing in you. Allow the flowers to strengthen, and the weeds will wither. The second student's garden was so lush with good, beaming flowers that the scattered weeds here and there were hardly noticeable. They were engulfed by beauty. The first student was curious and turned to the master and inquired, "How can this be? I toiled day and night to pull out every last one. My hands ache, my back hurts, and my garden is desolate and beset. His is blooming. How could this happen?" The master just smiled and said, "You put all your energy on what you didn't want to grow. Your friend put his energy on what he did want to grow. Where you put your focus is where you put your power. The soil does not discriminate. It will take care of whatever seeds you give water to, but what you choose to water is up to you." This ancient wisdom aligns perfectly with modern neuroscience. Our brains are like living gardens, constantly reshaping themselves through a process called neuroplasticity. Every thought you repeat, every story you tell yourself, every worry you entertain strengthens the neural pathways connected to that thought. Like carving grooves in the earth, your repeated mental patterns dig channels through which energy naturally flows. Each time you have a frightened thought, you are strengthening the fear circuitry, and it will become more and more comfortable for your brain to go there again and again. And each time you select a quieter, more peaceful thought, you're strengthening the path of peace, clarity, and strength. With each decision, you are reprogramming your brain. Let's make this practical. Suppose you have a presentation tomorrow morning. Already your mind may be planting seeds of fear. What if I forget my words? What if someone asks a question that I won't be able to answer? What if I embarrass myself? What if this doesn't go well? Every time you water these thoughts with focus, replaying them, fueling them, allowing them to reverberate, they become more powerful. Their roots take hold in your mind. Before you can even wake up tomorrow, you've gardened the worst-case scenario, and your body is reacting with tension, shallow breath, and the fog of fear. But suppose you decided to see differently, not the artificial sheen of fanciful optimism, but solid, empowering realities. I've worked hard on this. I'm familiar with this stuff. If I don't know every question, I can answer truthfully. I can cope with the moment as it arises. Do you see the transition? Not only in the words, but in the subtle manner in which your body reacts. The initial set of thoughts constricts your chest, accelerates your heartbeat, makes your breaths short. Panic yields to calm alertness. Confidence starts to unfurl.
This is precisely what the Buddha learned beneath the Bodhi tree. His enlightenment wasn't a lightning bolt from heaven. It was the product of careful observation. He saw that suffering didn't arise mainly from outer circumstances, but from the mind's response to them. And that response was conditioned by the seeds we decided to cultivate, the thoughts we permitted to germinate. That is why he proclaimed, "All that we are is the result of what we have thought." These words aren't mystical, but deeply practical. Your thoughts create thoughts. Your thoughts give rise to feelings, and your feelings inform your choices and actions. And your repetitive actions create the very life you live. But here's the interesting thing, and this may shock you. The thoughts that torment you the most typically aren't even about the current moment. They're not about what is happening in this instant. They're about what could happen. They're about the futures that you don't yet occupy. Consider Jennifer, a client of mine. She admitted that she was devoting almost 3 hours each night, worrying about a painful conversation she felt she must have with her teenage daughter regarding her grades. 3 hours of rehearsal for a conversation that had not even occurred. She pictured the arguments, the defensiveness, the tears. She nurtured the seeds of trouble in her mind for weeks, tending a garden of anxiety that ate away at her peace. And then the real talk came. It took 15 minutes. It was sweet, truthful, and much smoother than she had envisioned. The much-feared storm never materialized. All the effort she had put into anticipating opposition was effort lost, effort that had created tension where there was none. This is the quiet trap our minds lay for us. We spend so much of our existence living in the imagined future, sowing seeds in non-existent gardens, forgetting the only soil we can really touch, nurture, and feed is here, now, in this present moment. Right now is the only place your seeds can grow. Right now is the only place peace can take root. Let's do something together, here and now. I'd like you to remember something that's been on your mind recently. Don't criticize yourself for it. Worry is human. We all have things weighing on our minds, some small, some great. Just allow one to come up. Now, with that scenario in mind, pay attention. What type of thoughts have you been seeding around it? Are they thoughts that constrict your chest? Thoughts that shrink you? Thoughts that give you more anxiety? Or are they thoughts that ground you, enlarge your sense of power, and orient you toward peace? Here's the interesting part. The circumstances themselves haven't changed. Whatever's confronting you is still the same. And yet, by merely noticing the thoughts you've been cultivating, something already starts to change. Awareness itself is like sunshine. It doesn't push. It doesn't control. It merely sheds light. It gives you a clear picture of which plants in your garden of mind deserve to be cultivated and which ones have merely grown unruly beyond their use. Let me illustrate. Maya, a hardworking teacher I used to work with, feared parent-teacher conferences each year. Weeks in advance of October, she would go over all the worst-case scenarios in her head. She envisioned upset parents, biting criticisms, and insurmountable questions. When the actual conferences rolled around, she was so burdened by presumed catastrophes that she could hardly think clearly. Then something shifted. Maya started to pay attention to her mental gardening. She noticed that she wasn't going into the conferences clear-headed. She had been tending fear for weeks in advance, watering it every day with her focus.
So she decided to seed something else. Rather than stuck on, what if the parents are mad at me? She kindly substituted it with, most parents really care about their kids like I do. Rather than getting stuck on, what if I don't know everything? She encouraged herself, I care so much, and my caring shows, even when I don't know. Did this render the conferences flawless? No. There were still tough conversations. But something basic changed. Maya was no longer facing those challenges in panic. She was stable. She was centered. Her calming presence shifted not only her own experience, but also the experience of the parents and students who felt comforted by her assurance. There's a Zen saying that clarifies this with elegant simplicity. A student had once asked his master, how do I keep from getting negative thoughts? The master had responded, you don't. You just stop inviting them in to have tea. This is such a vital truth. The aim isn't never to have another anxious or fearful thought. Impossible, and pursuing that sort of perfection only adds to the pressure. The aim is to change your relationship with those thoughts, to view them not as intruders who are to be battled, nor as dictators who are to be complied with, but as guests. They come, they knock on the door of your head, and you choose how long they remain. When a scary thought shows up, you can observe it. There's that nagging fear about the presentation again. You don't have to judge it or struggle with it, and you don't have to indulge it by watering it with hours of focus. You can put it quietly on the periphery of your awareness and keep working on the thoughts that feed you. This is what the Buddha was referring to when he spoke of mindfulness. Mindfulness is not thinking, nor being able to turn your mind off like a switch. It is being able to see that thoughts are passing through without getting caught up in them. It is being in the middle of a storm and standing firm versus standing under cover observing the clouds pass across the sky. And here is something I want you to keep in mind, something that may help temper the way you perceive your own challenges. Each and every one of us has been an unwitting gardener. Each and every one of us has, at some time or another, sown seeds of concern, nourished them with focus, and then stood back in dismay at how overgrown and disordered our inner landscape seems. This is not a defect in your personality. It is not an indication that you are fractured. It is human nature. Nobody ever taught us how to be gardeners of the mind. But you are learning today, and that is a difference. The lovely truth about mental gardening is this. It's never too late to begin anew. The mind's soil is forever forgiving, forever fertile, forever waiting for new seeds. So here's a time practice for you to bring into next week. Whenever you catch yourself getting trapped in worry, stop and ask, what seed am I watering at this moment? That's all. Don't try to change anything. Don't judge, just observe. Because the second you observe, you introduce light, and sunlight transforms everything. Awareness is always the beginning of conscious choice. Imagine David, a person who was completely convinced that his small business was going to fail. For months, he only seeded fear, ideas of lack, of being too much competition for too little market, and surefire failure. His anxiety took so much of his energy that he could no longer perceive the possibilities that existed around him. He quit canvassing for new customers, quit talking about his ideas, and quit innovating. The marketplace wasn't his downfall. His own anxious frame of mind had quietly established itself as his most formidable competitor. But then something changed. David started to notice his thought garden. He saw that he had been watering weeds on a daily basis. Gradually, he started planting other seeds. Gratitude for the loyal clients that he still enjoyed. Enthusiasm about problem solving. Confidence in his capacity to evolve. His company did not change overnight, but his world inside did. And as his inner weather became more gentle, his vitality and creativity began to come back.
This change brought new possibilities, previously invisible to him, to begin to surface. This brings us to the first of the sacred truths. You're always planting something in your mental garden. The question is never if your thoughts are powerful. They are. The question is, Are you selecting that power consciously, or are you allowing it to spin out of control? Buddha used to compare the mind to a restless monkey, jumping from branch to branch, never quiet, always babbling. But even the most unruly monkey can be trained, not by force and punishment, but by patience, kindness, and persistent guidance. The same applies to your mind. So how do you become a conscious gardener of your inner world? First, start by just noticing. Throughout your day, catch yourself in the act of thinking. Stop and ask, what seeds am I planting in this moment? Are they seeds of worry or seeds of trust? Seeds of scarcity or seeds of abundance? Seeds of judgment or seeds of compassion? Second, never forget that you always have a choice. Even in the midst of a cycle of fearful thoughts, you can stop and ask, is this thought allowing me to cultivate something beautiful, or is it merely generating more fear? Third, patience. Gardens don't change overnight. Marcus, another student I used to work with, didn't destroy his inner garden one day, and he couldn't repair it in one day either. Gardening in the mind is a gradual, lifelong process, not a coerced one. Fourth, and most crucially, begin small. You don't have to revolutionize your entire mindset overnight. Start with one type of loving thought, today. Perhaps it's, I am doing the best I can. Perhaps it's, things have a way of working out. Or perhaps simply, I am enough. Even one seed of kindness, lovingly cared for, can bloom into something exquisite. Now, I'd like you to think of your mind as a great, lovely garden. Visualize the richest, blackest soil packed with infinite possibility. The morning sun shines in through the trees, and you catch a whiff of the smell of earth after rain. You have seeds in your hands. Some are seeds of peace. When you cultivate them, they become deep calm. Some are seeds of confidence. These blossom into quiet, unshakable strength. They are seeds of concern. Nurture them and they blossom into flowers of profound understanding and sympathy. But you do carry seeds of anxiety, seeds of uncertainty, seeds of fear. This is only natural. There is a weed in the garden of every gardener. The issue is not to root them out for good. The issue is to select carefully which ones you water. Then, so slowly and deeply, breathe in. Sense your feet planted deep into the earth below. Keep in mind, you are the gardener of your own inner soil. And starting right now, you can select to sow something lovely. The old Zen masters understood something deep. The outer world tends to reflect the condition of our inner garden. If your inner garden is overgrown with fear, you perceive danger in everything. When your inner garden is cultivated with peace, you start noticing opportunities where there once existed only walls. This is not about new agey positive thinking. This is about seeing clearly. As the Buddha taught, what you think, you become. What you feel, you attract. What you imagine, you create. Each moment is a fresh opportunity to make a choice about who you wish to be as a gardener. But there is one truth that I have yet to tell you. A truth that might contradict everything you've learned about what it means to be strong. And that is this. The strongest individuals are not necessarily those who battle the most energetically, but those who know the art of how to quit fighting altogether. And that, my friend, is what we shall go on to discover next. True strength dwells in surrender.
There's an old legend taught in Zen monasteries about two trees that sprouted side by side in a peaceful mountain valley. The first was a great oak, thick, strong, stubborn, its roots dug deep into the ground, its trunk wide and immovable. For years it had stood tall against every gust. Whenever the wind screamed, the oak defied with pride, "Behold me! I am stronger than you. I won't budge." Alongside it grew a bamboo, tall, delicate, bending with each wind. To the oak, flexibility was weakness. For the bamboo, "You are not strong," the oak would taunt. "You bend to anything. You lack backbone." One evening, a typhoon stormed through the valley. Winds howled with a fury that could rip buildings from their foundations. Rain pounded in blinding sheets, so heavy you could not see 3 feet before you. The oak flexed every muscle of its existence, strained, struggled, would not give way. "I will not bend," it proclaimed to the storm. The bamboo, however, bent low, yielding to the wind, moving like a dancer in perfect harmony with the power of the storm. By morning, the oak lay shattered, uprooted, its mighty trunk split and broken. The bamboo stood tall, glistening with dewdrops, swaying gently in the calm morning breeze, as if nothing had happened. This story is more than a tale from old Zen. It is a mirror for our own lives. For many of us, everything we've been taught about strength is backwards. We inhabit an oak-worshipping culture. Force your way through the agony. Don't ever quit. Dictate the endgame. Struggle more. Cling harder. We learn that strength lies in resisting, in holding on to the wheel of life until our knuckles whiten. What if that isn't strength? What if true strength is learning when to release the wheel, when to believe in the road, the river, the current of life? There is another Zen parable that captures this perfectly. A young, fierce swordsman once challenged an older master. He attacked the older man with great speed and strength, confident that his ferocity would consume him. But the master did not fight back. With a mere step aside, a fluid redirect, he let his younger warrior's own energy bring him down. The battle ended before it started. Perplexed and chastened, the young man inquired, "Why did you vanquish me so easily?" The master spoke gently, "I did not vanquish you. I merely moved aside and allowed your stiffness to vanquish itself." Real strength, therefore, is not necessarily about holding one's ground. At times, it is about giving away astutely, not crumbling, not surrendering, but flowing, bending, and letting go. This wisdom permeates all of Zen. The realization that the strongest action is sometimes non-action, that the best response is perhaps no response, that the strongest stance is often the most adaptive.
Take Michael, a top lawyer, a man who lived by the rigor of a soldier. His days were planned out in 15-minute slices. He dictated everything: what he ate, how he exercised, the path his career would take, even the social life he had. Everything had to be kept within schedule. When his wife was diagnosed with cancer, Michael met it the only way he could: by control. He became the oak against the storm. He read up on every conceivable treatment, made spreadsheets of survival rates, and micromanaged all aspects of her care. He worked longer hours in order to pay for the best experts, scheduled his own sleep to get maximum efficiency, and bullied himself to keep everything together with sheer willpower. For months, he stood firm and immovable, sure that if he just fought hard enough, he could halt the storm. But storms don't halt because we fight them. They don't have any regard for how tough you are. They don't stop because you fight. They don't yield to your will. They just keep blowing until something yields. For Michael, that breaking point occurred quietly on a Tuesday afternoon. He was in his office, 3 calls going simultaneously, one to a doctor's office, one to his assistant, a third to a colleague regarding a big case. His calendar resembled a battlefield, all the slots filled with pressing appointments and color-coded assignments. Then the phone rang once again. It was his wife. Her voice was shaking. The latest test results were not favorable. Something deep within him didn't just shatter. It shifted into a new place. Like a bone held out of place for too long, the only way it could ever really heal was by being realigned. Without utterance, Michael shut down his laptop, left his office, and drove directly home. He didn't strategize. He didn't plan. He didn't research survival rates or create a spreadsheet. He just got up and went into the room, put his arms around his wife, and hugged her. No words, no fixing, no controlling. Just existing. For the first time in months, he let go of what was really occurring instead of fighting against it. Later, Michael would explain, "It was the strangest thing. Letting go didn't make me feel weaker. It made me feel stronger than I had in months, but not strong as if I was keeping the world upon my shoulders, strong as if the world itself was keeping me." That transformation, forced to let go, is what the Zen masters define as true strength. There is a classic Zen parable that illustrates this. 2 monks were walking along when they arrived at a muddy riverbank. A young woman was there, unwilling to cross. No hesitance on the part of the first monk, however. He picked her up in his arms, carried her through the foamy water, and put her down on dry land. Then he continued walking. The second monk was appalled. Their oaths prohibited contact with women. He remained silent initially, but his thoughts seethed with condemnation. For hours, he seethed until he exploded. "How could you do that? You violated our vows. You carried her." The first monk gazed at him with serene eyes and replied, "Brother, I set her down hours ago. You are still carrying her." That is the contrast between rigidity and flexibility. One acts in response to the moment, then lets it go. The other holds on to rules, judgments, and fears after the moment has slipped away, creating unnecessary pain. This is what the Buddha himself taught about strength. He once spoke, "In the conflict between the stream and the rock, the stream always wins, not through force, but through persistence and flexibility." Water does not battle the mountain. It does not insist on the rocks to shift. It merely finds a path. Over, under, around, through, gently, patiently, incessantly. And in the end, it is not the rock that carves out the water, but the water that carves out the rock. But our society has conditioned us to be stones when life invites us to be water. There is a classic Zen koan about a student who asked his master, "What is the way?" The master gestured to a nearby stream and said, "Do you hear that water?" The student nodded. The master went on, "It never quarrels with the stones in its way. It flows around them, and eventually, those very stones become smooth and lovely. The water thanks the stones. They provide it something to dance around." That is surrender, not defeat, but a happy embracing of what is, while still progressing toward what beckons you. Consider the imagery we use with respect to strength. Tough it out. Power through. Grit your teeth. Don't let them see you sweat. All these metaphors presuppose that strength is resistance, that power is force, that victory is never giving in.
But have you ever seen a true master martial artist? They don't meet force with force. They don't constrict against the impact. They give way, deflect, change. They allow the opponent's power to negate itself. There's a lovely tale about Morihei Ueshiba, the creator of Aikido. A young challenger one day appeared set to prove himself against the old master. The young man rushed forward with incredible energy, anticipating overwhelming the old teacher with force. But Ueshiba merely moved out of the way, put down a soft hand, and deflected the energy of the attack. The young man was sent rolling harmlessly onto the ground, bewildered and dazed. He was out of breath and exclaimed, "How did you do that?" The master smiled and replied, "I did nothing. I merely did not resist." That is the paradox of surrender. It appears as if doing nothing, but it is the greatest act of all. You defeated yourself. I merely demonstrated a different way to move. This is the heart of what Zen philosophy refers to as Wu Wei. Acting through non-acting, strength through yielding, power through letting go. It is not a matter of doing nothing. It is a matter of aligning oneself so deeply with the natural flow of life that each action becomes easy, each response comes with clarity, and each movement is directed rather than compelled.
Consider the healthiest relationships you're aware of. Are they the ones where both individuals are rigid, unbending, always in a need to be right, never yielding? Or are they the ones where each is able to soften, bend, and flow around the hard edges of the other? True love strength is not in dominance or control, but in flexibility, the capacity to give and take without shattering. Sandra found this reality when her teenage son dived into the darkness of depression. Her initial reaction, as with many parents, was to battle for him. She engaged the finest therapist, constructed strict timetables, attempted to coax him out of bed every morning, drove him to get back to life, to become the boy he had once been. Her days became a war zone, her oak-like resolve battering against his unshakable silence. The more she pressed, the further he pulled away. What he experienced as pressure, she referred to as love. What he felt as suffocation, she perceived as care. The house was no longer home. It was a war zone of silent despair. Then one day, in a therapy session of her own, Sandra's counselor posed her a question so straightforward and yet so unnerving that it shook her to her very foundations. What would happen if you stopped trying to fix him and started trusting him? At first, the question had almost sounded irresponsible. Wasn't it her responsibility as a mother to fix his issues, to save him from this darkness? Wasn't stepping aside the same as leaving him behind? The very idea petrified her. But in that moment of terror, she recalled a Zen parable she had once read. A desperate young gardener would go out every morning and open the buds with his fingers. He would do this day after day, trying to push the petals wide, thinking he was doing good. But every flower he touched would wither and die. Then one day, an old monk who was walking by stood before him and said, "Your enthusiasm is killing what you love. Flowers bloom when they are ready. Trust their wisdom. They know the moment better than you do." Sandra saw she was doing the same thing to her son. Her frantic efforts to coerce his healing were suffocating him rather than assisting him. So shaking with doubt, she did something entirely different. She surrendered. Rather than fighting mornings, she started leaving breakfast quietly on the counter, along with a humble note, "I love you." Rather than trying to lecture him on therapy, she left the door open. Appointments were available if he would have them, but no pressure. Rather than attempt to engineer his recovery, she redirected her attention to bringing peace to the new home, a place where healing could happen organically. The transformation was not overnight, but something insidious changed.
The tension that had hung in the air started to dissipate, and in the quiet, her son gradually started to resurface, not because she drew him back out, but because he could finally breathe. This is the paradox of surrender that the Buddha taught. When you cease to force things, you allow room for things much greater than anything you ever could have thought to plan. When you let go, you find what was available to greet you all along. But let's be clear, surrender is not giving up. Too many people confuse the two. Giving up is resignation, collapse, apathy. It is walking away in despair. Surrender, however, is alive, conscious, and intensely powerful. There is a traditional Zen proverb that illustrates this difference. One day, a student asked his teacher, "What is the difference between surrender and giving up?" The teacher took him to a river where the salmon were swimming upstream. He said, "Observe carefully." The salmon yielded to the flow when they required rest, saving energy. They let the water transport them without a fight. But they never lost hope in their journey. When they were in the right time, they swam again, jumping, fighting, striving toward their target. The master smiled. This is surrender. To work with the river, not against it. To yield without losing your direction. Giving up is to let the current sweep you away entirely. Surrender is the wisdom to flow and the strength to persist. True surrender is therefore active. It is deciding to do your best, your most sincere, your most attentive, then releasing the expectation of controlling the result. It is similar to planting a seed. You till the ground, you water it, you put it in the sun. You do all you can to aid its growth, but you don't dig it up every day to see if it's happening. You have faith in the process. You trust life. That was what David, an ambitious young businessman, finally realized when his startup was coming apart. For 2 merciless years, he toiled 18-hour days. He held on to every detail, micromanaged each decision, insisted on perfect precision from his workers. But the harder he held on, the more everything fell apart. Employees walked out, investors lost interest, customers became frustrated. The more he attempted to will success, the more it slid out of his reach. David was like a man trying to cup water in his hands. The tighter he squeezed, the faster it slipped through his fingers. His effort, his discipline, his sleepless nights, none of it seemed to hold. Finally, one night, at 3 a.m, sitting alone in his silent office, he leaned back in his chair and whispered to the darkness, "I don't know what I'm doing anymore." It wasn't defeat, it was integrity. For the first time in years, David acknowledged the truth, not only to the world, but to himself. And in that vulnerable moment, something changed within him. It wasn't the shattering of his resolve, but the gentle unfolding of a new strength. Rather than burning himself out attempting to dictate results that were forever beyond his control, David started shifting his focus towards what was always within his power. His own behavior, his own mindset, his own being present in the moment. Instead of insisting his team conform to his vision, he started hearing them out, genuinely hearing them out, rather than trying to dictate results that were forever beyond his control. The company did not change overnight. Investors didn't just materialize, nor did the profits double within a week. But something much more fundamental changed first. David's connection to his work changed. He felt less encumbered, freer, more innovative, more cooperative. He ceased bracing against the world and started moving with it. And in that place of elastic strength, possibility began to reveal itself. Possibility he had been too inflexible to perceive before. This is what the Buddha was saying when he taught that attachment is the cause of suffering. Most people confuse attachment with love or with commitment. But attachment is not love. Attachment is the insistence that life fit your script,
your schedule, your agenda. It is the clenched fist that says, this has to be mine, and it has to look just the way I want it. True love, true strength, really does look different. It is not controlling, it is caring without agenda. It is not rigid, it is alive and open. When you let go of attachment, you don't stop loving, actually you love more profoundly. But you love with open hands, not clenched fists. You love because not as a result of the other person or the result appearing the way you wish, but because love is your own nature. You work hard, but not being a slave to results.
There is a lovely Zen exercise that demonstrates this. It's called holding water. Take some quiet time, sit down, and place your hands as if cradling water. Visualize that the water in your hands is something you've been struggling desperately to control. A relationship, a career, a health battle, a family problem. Now, picture holding that water softly, with gentle and open hands. Feel how the water remains, how it rests quietly, supported, but never confined. Now, imagine squeezing tightly, gripping with all your strength to ensure nothing escapes. Immediately, the water begins to leak through your fingers, draining faster the harder you fight to keep it. This is the difference between caring and controlling, between love and detachment, between strength and force. Life wants to stay in open hands, but it will always escape clenched fists. Rebecca learned this the toughest way possible, with her daughter's addiction. For 3 years, Rebecca dedicated herself to saving her daughter. She funded rehab programs, organized interventions, cleaned up legal crises, called employers, begged and pleaded, micromanaged every aspect of her daughter's life. She thought if she worked enough, pushed hard enough, loved fiercely enough, she could will recovery. But rather than healing, the relationship cracked. Every conversation was an argument over sobriety. Every family gathering was filled with unspoken disappointment. Her daughter stopped taking her calls, avoided visits, moving further and further away. Rebecca's love had morphed into pressure, and that pressure had become more than she could bear. Then, one night, at a support group, Rebecca overheard a phrase that struck her hard. You didn't cause it, you can't control it, and you can't cure it. It struck her like a soft lightning bolt. She saw that she had been attempting to bear a burden that was never hers to bear. Her daughter's healing was not her work to finish. It was her daughter's journey to take. With shaking and tears, Rebecca made the most difficult decision of her life. She released, not her daughter, not her love, but her control. She ceased being the fixer, the rescuer, the manager of her daughter's destiny. She turned her attention to her own healing, her own resilience. She moved from working so hard to be her daughter's hero to just being her mother once more. And when the control was ceased, something miraculous occurred. My daughter called me just to talk, Rebecca recounted later. Not because she needed something, not because there was a crisis, just because she missed our connection. For the first time in years, we talked about life, about memories, about goofy things. We remembered who we were to each other. This is the miracle of surrender. When you cease demanding change, space for change to occur is made. When you cease forcing love, love has room to breathe for the first time. When you cease controlling results, results beyond your wildest imagination become accessible. The Buddha once made the statement, "You only lose what you cling to." This is not a threat, it's a promise. If you let go, What was not yours in the first place will depart, and what was for you will be left. And when it remains, it won't be because you held on to it, but because it wanted to stay. That's the wonder of love without shackles, of power without force, of yielding without falling. So how do you get started building that bamboo-like strength in your everyday life? First, pay attention to where you are being the oak. Where are you positioned stiffly against the storms of life? Where are you battling battles that leave you drained, but no nearer peace, no nearer what you truly desire? Second, practice the pause. When you catch yourself clenching harder, whether during an argument, a tense meeting, or a moment of profound uncertainty, breathe and ask, what would it look like to be water here instead of rock? Third, keep in mind that flexibility is a product of inner strength. The bamboo bends, but is not weak. At its core, it is incredibly strong. True surrender is not generated by insecurity, but by inner stability. You can be pliable with circumstances, yet grounded in your most fundamental values. And lastly, have faith in the process. Water always makes its way to the sea. It doesn't come rushing in a straight shot. It bends around obstacles. It collects in quiet spots. It erodes new roots with time. Your life has this same subtle wisdom. If you cease pushing against direction and start flowing in accord with what wants to be birthed, you will find that life is constantly drawing you toward the ocean of your becoming. So consider, right now, one part of your life where you've been behaving like the oak, stiff, pushing back, insisting things change. What would it be like to become bamboo in that place? To remain anchored in what is most important, yet to bend where you can. To flow rather than fight. Take a slow, deep breath. Feel into that possibility. Feel how your body responds to releasing control. Feel how much lighter it is to flow rather than to resist. This is your inner wisdom whispering truth. True strength does not come from resistance. It comes from resilience. Observe nature. The greatest forces, the ones that form whole landscapes, are the most adaptable. Water erodes canyons. Wind sculpts mountains. Time changes everything. None of them employ force. They use patient, steady flow. You have that same power inside you. The power to craft your life, not through coercion, but through soft, unyielding surrender. The intelligence to be firm when it matters, and flexible when it does not. The bravery to release that which you cannot control, so you can focus your energy on that which you can. This is the second sacred truth. Inner strength resides in surrender. Not the surrender of defeat, but the surrender of faith. Not the weakness of resignation, but the power of release. Not the fall of the oak, but the beautiful resilience of the bamboo. But here's something that could totally shift how you think about your own stress and anxiety. It has nothing to do with how strong or flexible you are. It has everything to do with where your mind is spending most of its time. Because although your body is always here in the moment, your mind is usually somewhere else completely. And that somewhere else is where most of your suffering resides.
Let me illustrate. Once there was a woman called Grace who went for 37 years putting herself ready for catastrophes that did not occur. Each day, Grace would wake up and start practicing her fears immediately. What if the work presentation would not go well? What if my daughter was involved in an accident on her way to school? What if that unusual noise in the car indicated a costly repair? What if, what if, what if? Grace was a master at dwelling within tomorrow's issues. She spent her nights reliving make-believe conversations, rehearsing makeshift arguments, preparing for crises that never materialized. Her brain was like a cinema hall where horror films about the future alone played. And here's the pitiful irony. Grace spent her life expecting tomorrow, yet she lost the one day she ever really had. Today. Grace spent her time getting ready for hypothetical crises. As her imagination wrestled with a never-ending string of what-ifs, actual life was happening all around her. Her daughter's first steps, tentative and miraculous. Her husband's unobtrusive jokes at meals, slight gestures of connection. The sun on the morning waking up the kitchen table, bathing the world in gold for a precious handful of minutes. All these priceless, irreplaceable moments went by unmarked because Grace wasn't really there. She occupied a seat at the table, but her mind was elsewhere, already waging war in a future that existed only in her imagination. One fall evening, while leaves drifted down like soft words outside her window, Grace's daughter posed a question so innocent and yet so sharp that it opened something up inside of her. "Mom, do you ever really look at me?" The question paralyzed Grace. Naturally, she looked at her daughter. She adored her, fretted over her every moment, shielded her, and mapped out her life in careful advance. She was constantly concerned for her good. But her daughter, aged beyond her years, went on quietly. "I don't mean that way. I mean, do you notice me at all right now? When I'm sitting here with you, when I'm speaking to you, are you present here with me? Or are you absent somewhere else, preoccupied with tomorrow?" Grace's chest constricted. At that moment, she knew something devastating. She had been living as a ghost in her own life. Physically there, yes, but mentally elsewhere. Always somewhere else, always adrift in a future that was still to come. She had spent decades planning for tomorrow, but in doing so, she had forgotten the one thing that ever existed, the present moment. And this leads us to the third sacred truth, the one the Buddha learned more than 2,500 years ago. Fear cannot exist in the present. It exists only in the mind's boundless projection of what may be, what could be, what should be, but isn't. Consider it. When you're anxious, where is your head? It's not often here. It's speeding ahead into hypothetical situations, creating elaborate what-if tales, pulling you into a future that doesn't yet exist. A world of maybes, of shadows, of issues that you don't presently encounter. But as your mind travels to tomorrow's worries, your body is here. Your breathing is occurring now. Your pulse is occurring now. Your feet are planted on the floor below you now. And this moment now, is the only place where life actually occurs. There's an ancient Zen story that illustrates this truth beautifully. A monk was walking through a forest when suddenly a tiger appeared and began chasing him. Heart-pounding, the monk ran until he reached the edge of a cliff. With nowhere else to go, he grabbed hold of a vine and began to climb down. But when he glanced up, there was the tiger patrolling above. And when he glanced down, there was another one waiting below. To cap it all, he saw two mice, one black and one white, gnawing at the vine supporting him. His life hung by a thread. And yet in that instant danger, the monk saw one small wild strawberry of the cliff. He stretched out his hand, picked it, and he ate it. It was the sweetest strawberry that he had ever eaten. This story isn't about pretending danger doesn't exist. It isn't about recklessness or denial. It's about presence, the profound peace that comes from fully inhabiting the moment you're in, even if it isn't perfect, even if challenges surround you. The monk could have wasted his final moments worrying about the tigers or panicking about the mice. Instead, he tasted the sweetness available right then and there. And that's what the majority of us lose sight of. We live as Grace does, so intent on tigers that may arrive tomorrow that we forget about the strawberries before us today. Our brains are fantastic time machines. In a split second, they can whisk us away to the memory of any past moment or imagined future. But this is the paradox. The same power that makes our minds so amazing is also the reason for much of our angst, because when the mind leaps to tomorrow, it doesn't put joy and possibility in the suitcase. It loads it with worry, doubt, and fear. The Buddha understood this with perfect clarity. He noticed that individuals ache much more in their imagination than they do in fact. We script horror films for our minds, creating entire films about catastrophes that have not occurred. Then we watch in the cinema of our imagination and feel every bit of fear, tension, and heartbreak as if it were happening. Now, take a moment to think. How much of your own day do you spend in this manner? How many hours do you waste worrying about things that have not occurred at all? That confrontational chat with your boss that might even not go the way you imagine. That nagging ache or cough that you've already begun catastrophizing into worst-case scenario. That financial or relational what if that endlessly circles your brain. And here's the liberating truth. None of that exists right now. The only thing that exists is this moment. The breath you're taking, the life moving through you. And in this exact moment, there is space, there is calm, there is peace. The financial issues that may come up if something as simple as one thing goes wrong, the relationship issues that may ensue if your partner's mood indeed signifies what you suspect it does. The myriad what-ifs that invade your mind layer upon layer until your brain is burdened with a future that has not even come to pass. But stop for a moment and reflect on the following. How many of your previous anxious thoughts ever occurred exactly as you feared? How many of the catastrophes you ever planned for with restless nights and ceaseless anxiety ever really materialized? And of the ones which did, how many were as disastrous, as insupportable as your imagination had anticipated? We usually discover that the future never arrives in the very nightmare forms our minds imagine. And even when life does present us with difficulty, we almost never discover less strength, less help, less resourcefulness than we believe to be available to us. There's a lovely Zen parable that conveys this reality with stark simplicity. One day, a student appeared before his master in deep distress. "Master," said the student, "I am perpetually anxious about what is going to happen to me in the future. My mind won't settle. I can't sleep. I can't concentrate. I can't be at peace." The master gave him a heavy rock and instructed him, "Carry this wherever you go today. Do not lay it down, not for an instant." The student complied. He carried the rock around the marketplace, into his dwelling place, as he worked, as he walked. At night, his arms throbbed, his back pained, his body fatigued. At last, he went back to the master, spent. "Master," he complained, "this stone is too heavy. It makes everything more difficult. I can hardly function." The master smiled kindly. "That stone is just as heavy whether you hold it for 5 minutes or 5 hours. The pain you're experiencing is not from the stone itself, but from the duration you've held onto it. Your anxiety for the future is the same. They don't gain weight over the years, but clasping them forever tires you out." The student inquired, "But how do I lay down my concerns?" The master responded, "The way you lay down the stone. You release it." That is the nature of mindfulness. Not the watered-down version that's marketed as an efficiency trick, but the genuine practice the Buddha actually taught. It is the practice of patiently, lovingly, coming back to now. Not by force or control, but by simply paying attention when the mind has gone to tomorrow's darkness and lovingly, tenderly coaxing it back home to the present. Jennifer, who has 2 children, learned this reality firsthand. She found herself spending almost 3 hours each night mentally preparing for an argument she believed she would need to have with her teenage daughter regarding her grades. 3 hours of virtual combat, scripted retorts, and expected pushback, all staged in the cortex of her brain. When the discussion actually did take place, it only lasted for a total of 15 minutes. And much to her relief, it went much better than she'd anticipated. Afterwards, she thought, I was operating in a totally different reality. I was battling battles that weren't occurring, with a version of my daughter who wasn't even upset. I was curing problems that didn't exist while missing out on the opportunity to simply relish her presence in the evenings. This is what the Buddha was getting at when he declared that most of our suffering is between the ears. The present moment, in fact, is usually more benevolent than the tales our minds weave to tell us about it. Consider right now, as you hear these words, you probably are all right. You are breathing, your heart is pounding, you are here, alive, held by this moment. And in this very moment, you are safe. But the mind is unruly, like a kid in the back seat on a road trip. It will keep pulling on your arm saying, are we there yet? What if we lose our way? What if we use up all our gas? It won't just rest and look around. It is consumed with thoughts of what could go wrong before you even get there. And yet, there is a second teaching of Zen that perfectly balances this nagging striving. It states, you are perfect exactly as you are, and you need a little work on yourself. This initially seems to be a paradox, but it isn't. It is a reminder that now, as it is complete, whole, and sufficient. And yet, simultaneously, life must grow, unfold, and evolve. Both of those truths coexist. But here's the thing, you can't make better what you aren't truly present for. If you're always in tomorrow, then you're missing the only place that actual change, actual healing, and actual living can ever take place. Here, now. And here is the present. Coming back to the now doesn't need to involve fancy rituals or decades of seclusion. It can be as mundane as recognizing where your mind has strayed and quietly coaxing it back, like calling a favorite pet who has wandered too far from home, not with punishment, not with frustration, but with gentleness. Here's a simple practice you can try right now. Look around and notice 5 things you can see in your immediate environment. Don't just glance at them, really see them. Notice their shapes, colors, textures, the way light rests on their surfaces. Then, listen for 4 things that you can hear. The whir of a fan, the sound of your own breathing, the distant noises outside your window, the minor details you generally don't notice. Perhaps it's the rhythm of your own respiration, steady and slow, or perhaps it's the thin whir of electronics in the distance. Perhaps you hear the distant beat of cars outside, one passing by, a horn faintly resonating. Do not characterize these noises as good or bad. Do not judge them as pleasing or distasteful. Simply notice them as they truly are. Pure awareness, pure noticing. And now turn your attention to 3 things that you can feel. Attend to the temperature of the air caressing your skin, cool or warm, light or heavy. Pay attention to the texture of the clothing on your body, rough or smooth, close or loose. Pay attention to the weight of your body, the way the chair or bed or floor is holding you up completely without expecting anything in return. Smell 2 things. Even if you're convinced the air itself smells like nothing, take a slow breath and look for something in there. Maybe it's coffee that lingered, the trace of soap or detergent, the richness of the air itself.
Finally, take notice of something you can taste. Perhaps it is merely the bland taste of your own mouth, or the lingering aftertaste of something you consumed or drank previously. Whatever it is, take notice of it without judgment. This easy exercise, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, softly grounds you in your senses, and your senses are always here, always in the present moment. Your eyes can't see yesterday. Your ears can't hear tomorrow. Your skin can't touch the past, and your nose can't smell the future. The senses are reliable doorways back into now. The Buddha said that the present moment is the only where life really occurs. The past exists only as memory. The future exists only as imagination. But the present, this very breath, this heartbeat, this awareness, is the only place where we can act, love, create, and live. And yet we spend so much of our lives walking away from this miracle of now, time traveling in our minds and missing the only moment where change and joy are truly possible. There's a classic Zen parable that says it in a nutshell. Once, a student asked a master, "What is enlightenment?" The master said, "When hungry, eat. When tired, sleep." The student scrunched up his face in puzzlement. "But everybody does that. What's so magical about it?" The master smiled gently and said, "No, they don't. When most people eat, their minds are lost in thoughts of work or money. When they lie down to sleep, their minds are racing with tomorrow's worries. When they're at work, they're longing for home. When they're at home, they're thinking about work. Very few people are ever truly where they are." This is what mindfulness is not about, forcing your mind to be a vacuum or suppressing every thought. It's about disciplining your awareness to be here with what is presently occurring. It's about eating when you're eating, walking when you're walking, breathing when you're breathing. Mark, a project manager, learned it the hard way when his doctor informed him he had perilously high blood pressure due to chronic stress. Mark spent every waking moment in a state of mental warfare. Every evening he lay awake going over all the things that could possibly go wrong with his projects. He practiced how he would deal with issues that hadn't even occurred. He solved in his mind crises that didn't even exist. "I knew I was spending my whole life in crisis mode," Mark confessed. "I was constantly getting ready for the next crisis. I was constantly somewhere else in my head. My body was suffering because my mind was preoccupied with possible futures." So Mark started practicing what he termed moment alerts, short reality checks throughout the day. He would stop, inhale deeply, and ask himself, "Where am I at this instant? What is really occurring right now in this precise moment?" More often than not, the response caught him by surprise. He was just sitting at his office desk typing an email with the golden light pouring in through the window. He was stepping to a meeting feeling the constant beat of his feet on the ground, observing the lovely transition of the autumn leaves. He was seated at the dinner table, savoring his food, listening to the laughter of his children. I began to understand that much of my life really was quite pleasant, but only when I was present enough to pay attention. The tension wasn't so much coming from what was actually happening. It was coming from the stories my mind was spinning about what could happen. It wasn't the moment that scared me. It was the specter of what could come, the ghost of possible futures. This is the deep insight the Buddha taught about the origin of anxiety. It doesn't come from reality as it exists, but from the narratives we construct of what may be. Fear is nourished by uncertainty, by the unknown, by the not yet arrived. It flourishes in the gap between now and then. But in the immediate moment, here, now, in the stark simplicity of this breath, there is often a deeper safety, a silent okayness that fear cannot reach. Stop with me now, at this moment, as you listen, as breath enters your lungs and your heart goes on beating steadily. Are you not in this one instant, fundamentally, all right? Not tomorrow when the deadline draws near, not next month when things have to be settled, not sometime in the distance in the uncertain future, but here and now in this living, breathing moment, are you not held by life itself? Most individuals, if they pause and actually observe, find the answer is yes. The now time has an underlying deep sense of security. It is the mind's projections onto the future that create chaos, not oftentimes the now time. This is not to say life doesn't have difficulties. It isn't to say problems disappear or tasks dissipate, but it does mean that in this instant, before the mind starts racing ahead, before fear weaves its web, you are here, breathing, alive, and able to greet life as it arrives. The Buddha once spoke, "Do not dwell in the past. Do not dream of the future. Focus the mind on the present moment." This teaching is not an exhortation to forget lessons learned in the past, nor does it disavow sensible forward planning. Instead, it's an encouragement to notice an important difference. Planning and worrying are not the same thing. Preparation makes you stronger, but worrying only wears you down. Anxiety itself doesn't get you ready for what comes next, it just tires you now. There's a lovely practice in the Zen tradition called just sitting. It is sheerly elegant and incredibly profound. You sit in stillness, not for any particular state, not in pursuit of enlightenment. You just let yourself be. Thoughts come like fleeting clouds across an open sky. Feelings pass like storms, fierce and sudden, but transient. And you stay like the sky itself, open, expansive, untroubled by what goes through. But this practice doesn't have to be limited to a meditation cushion. You can bring it into your life. You can practice simply standing when you are waiting in line at the supermarket, simply walking when you are going from one location to another, simply breathing during the middle of a hectic day, reminding yourself that with each breath, you are connected to the here and now. The most important thing is gentleness. When your mind wanders off into tomorrow's anxieties or yesterday's regrets, no harsh adjustment is necessary. You do not berate yourself for being human. Rather, you observe, "Oh, my thoughts have strayed," and with compassion, you steer them back, as if guiding a dear friend home with gentle care. Lisa, mother of 3, long ago developed her own practice, which she referred to as red light meditation. Each time she found herself idling at a traffic light, rather than running over in her mind her to-do list or worriedly counting the minutes that tick by, she drew 3 slow, mindful breaths. She opened herself to what was immediately around her: the sunlight on the windshield, birdsong, the sensation of her hands on the steering wheel.
With time, those short breaks changed her days. She went on later to say, "I realized I have been pushing through my whole life, always leaning forward into the next moment, never really being in the one I was in." When the abbot learned of this, he summoned the worried monk to his quarters. "Describe for me these tigers that frighten you," the abbot said gently. The monk painted them in rich color, their dimensions, their stealth, their ferocity, the flash of their eyes at night, the sound of their breathing just outside the walls. The abbot waited attentively. Then, after a long pause, he spoke a single question. "Have you ever actually seen one of these tigers?" The monk cast down his eyes. "Well, no," he owned up, "but I have heard them. I have felt their presence." The abbot smiled with understanding. "My dear friend, you have imagined tigers so vividly in your mind that you can hear them, smell them, even feel their presence. But they are nowhere to be found except in your imagination. You are not afraid of tigers. You are afraid of what your mind has created." This is the fourth sacred truth. Most of the storms we plan for never materialize. Most of our fears are ghost fears, products of a mind that was designed to scan for threat, but has not yet learned to tell real danger from imagined. Now, take a minute or two and think about your own life. Look back over the last 5 years. Remember all the things you were afraid of. The job you thought you'd lose, the breakup you dreaded, the health crisis that looked so dire, the economic meltdown you kept running through in your mind. How many of those dreaded calamities actually occurred in the very manner you envisioned them? Most find that the overwhelming majority of their fears never transpire, and of the handful that do occur in some manner, they rarely do so with the apocalyptic scale the mind envisioned. We're very resilient beings, much more able to manage actual problems than our worried imagination credits us with. There was a different Zen lesson involving a merchant who traveled to a faraway city with a precious shipment. He heard along the way that the road was infested with robbers who murdered and stole from travelers. He became overcome with fear. Each mile he traveled, he envisioned the ambush. He saw the bandits in the shadows of trees, heard them in the wind's whisper, felt them beating in his chest. At last he could not endure it any longer. He turned back and went home, giving up his mission and losing the fortune that he had hoped to acquire. Years passed before he discovered the truth. There were never any bandits on that road. The gossip had been initiated by a sly rival who wished to deter others from trading. The trader had not only lost the potential gains of his trip, he had also lost the opportunity to form enriching contacts and enrich his life. Fear had taken from him more than any robber ever could. And so it is with us. The dangers our imaginations conjure up tend to be more expensive than the real challenges we encounter. Our ghostly fears disturb our sleep, drain our bodies, and steal our opportunities. Yet the storms we prepare for our entire lives, most of the time, never actually come. His fear of a non-existent danger had cost him very real opportunities. Buddha taught that our minds tend to be like this merchant, more fearful of dangers imagined than paying attention to real possibilities. He referred to this tendency as the second arrow of suffering. The first arrow is what does happen in life: loss, disappointment, sickness, failure, change. These are inevitable. No human being avoids them. But the second arrow is the one we fire into ourselves, the constant stories we tell ourselves about what did happen, or more likely, about what may happen next. The first arrow hurts. The second arrow is a choice. Take Sarah, for example. For months, she dwelled in misery over the fear of being let go. Each morning, she woke up with a knot in her stomach. Each evening, she came home drained by the burden of fear. She thought about losing her job, not being able to pay the mortgage, having to explain unemployment to her kids, letting down her family. She lost sleep. Her health started to unravel. Her relationships suffered. In reality, Sarah still had a job, but mentally and emotionally, she was already out of work, already living in the worst-case scenario. When the layoffs were eventually announced, Sarah's job was actually cut. But rather than the disaster she had dreaded, she found something she never could have dreamed of. Her severance package was generous. The employment market in her area of expertise was robust. And within 6 weeks, she had a superior job to the one she had lost. In retrospect, she said, "I knew I'd been living in my own horror movie. The real experience of losing my job and getting a new one was much less agonizing than the months I spent expecting it to be. I'd spent so much energy battling phantoms." This is such a typical pattern that Buddha created teachings on mental formations, the ways the mind tends to build our reality according to habit. These formations function as lenses that we use to perceive the world. When our formations are controlled by fear, we perceive threat everywhere. When our formations are formed by peace, we perceive opportunity instead. The same mind that came up with tigers in a monastery is the one that perceives disaster in every change, betrayal in every silence, rejection in every slow response. It is not that the mind is evil, it is just attempting to protect us. But it often fails to see the difference between actual danger and possible danger, between prudent caution and debilitating fear. There is a Zen tale of a master who was famous for his bravery. A student once questioned him, "Master, aren't you ever afraid of anything?" The master answered, "I fear everything, but I have found that I can tell the difference between the tigers that are in the room and those that are only in my head." The student pushed on. "How do you know when you've crossed the line?" The master smiled. "The real tigers require action. The imaginary tigers only require understanding." This is the secret to working with phantom fears, learning to differentiate between threats that need action and fears that need awareness. When you are afraid, stop and ask, is this tiger real or is this tiger imaginary? A real tiger could be a health issue that needs doctoring, a relationship problem that needs talking, a work problem that needs a concrete choice. These are calls to action, not to reflect. A fictional tiger, however, typically comes in the guise of a narrative. What if this occurs? What if things go from bad to worse? What if they depart? What if I fail? But pay close attention. It is not occurring at the moment. These ghost stories solicit all the physiological reactions of real danger, pounding heart, shallow breathing, constricted muscles, without providing us with the clarity of overcoming a real obstacle.
Here's an easy exercise you can practice to determine whether your fear is phantom or actual. Stop when you catch yourself feeling anxious. Don't spin further into the story. Just stop and breathe. Ask yourself, is this occurring at the moment? Or is this merely a story about what may occur? If it's occurring at the moment, act with the wisest response you can muster. Action dispels fear. If it is a tale of the future, accept it as what it is, merely a thought, merely a possibility, not actuality. By doing this, you condition your mind to let go of its hold on ghostly tigers and come back to the solid ground of what is. Her fear of a non-existent danger had lost her actual opportunities. Buddha frequently likened the human mind to this merchant, more afraid of shadows than receptive to light, more concerned about perceived threats than receptive to genuine opportunities. He termed this the second arrow of suffering. The first arrow is reality itself, loss, disappointment, illness, change. They cannot be avoided. They hit everyone because life itself contains hardship. But the second arrow is of our own making. It is the narrative that we create out of the event, the projections, the distortions, the disasters we recreate in our heads. The initial arrow is unavoidable. The second is voluntary. We cannot pierce ourselves with dummy arrows while we already bear the wound of the actual. Consider the case of Sarah. She endured months of suffering over a potential layoff at her firm. Every morning she woke up with fear, picturing herself out of work, unable to afford the mortgage, trying to explain to her kids why she could no longer give them as much. Every day was tainted by anxiety. She lost sleep. Her body started to bear the brunt. Stress headaches, digestive problems, short temper that put a strain on family life. She was having the nightmare of being unemployed and still collecting a salary. When the layoffs actually arrived, Sarah's job was gone. The feared moment had come, but the reality was unlike the bleak visions she had practiced. Her package to leave was generous. The employment market in her area was healthy. In 6 weeks, she had landed a new position, higher pay, more cooperative coworkers, and new opportunities. Looking back, Sarah understood something remarkable. The agony of expectation had been worse than the experience itself. I was living in a horror film of my own making, she explained. The actual process of losing my job and getting another one was not as bad as the months I spent battling phantoms. This is what the Buddha was referring to when he referred to mental formations, the tendencies for our mind to build reality in certain ways. These formations are filters. They don't merely report reality, they condition what we see. When the mind is conditioned by fear, everything appears as a threat. When it is conditioned by peace, the same situation presents opportunities. The mind that pictures prowling tigers in the monastery is also the mind which pictures betrayal in every silence, calamity in every change, and rejection in every slow response. It is not that the mind is evil. One wants to believe it is acting to protect us, but in so doing it tends to mix up possibility with certainty and caution with paralysis. There is a deep Zen parable of a master who is famous for his bravery. One day a student asked him, "Master, are you never afraid of anything?" The master said, "Certainly I am afraid, but I have learned to know the difference between the tigers that are really in the room and the tigers that are in my mind." The student pushed again. "How do you know the difference?" The master smiled. "The true tigers take action. The imaginary tigers only take knowing." This is the crux of dealing with phantom fears, learning to discern whether a danger requires our action or merely our knowledge. So, when fear is present, stop and ask, is this tiger real, or is this tiger imagined? A real tiger could be a medical illness that must be treated, an interpersonal conflict that needs open communication, or a money issue that necessitates sensible planning. These need to be acted upon and done with courage. An imaginary tiger is a tale of the future, though, a vision of what may be, what will go wrong, what we think will happen. And while these tales produce the same racing heart, clammy hands, and nights spent awake as actual danger, they do not have the clarity of facing an actual obstacle. To sort the two apart, try this simple exercise. Ask, is this occurring in the moment, or is it a tale of what could occur? If it is occurring in the moment, do something. If it is a story, make it a story. Ask, if it did occur, what would I really do? Distinguish between vague fear and concrete action. Our secret strength lies in the move from fear to action. Fear loves vagueness and makes us afraid, but becomes powerless against actual steps. Ask, how many times have I fretted about this already? And how many times has it gone as awfully as I've imagined? This puts the pattern into perspective. Worry is a loop, but life is not its script. Ask, what am I not seeing because I'm so obsessed with this fear? Fear constricts vision, but attention opens it. When we cease to gawk at phantom tigers,
actual opportunities materialize. Michael, a manager of an expanding business, learned this. He had been asked to present to the board of directors. For weeks, he practiced failure, forgetting what to say, the projector conking out, the directors making fun of him as an incompetent buffoon. His nerves took over. But when he used the practice, everything changed. Is this occurring now? No, it was still 3 weeks off. What would I do if something was wrong? He thought about how he could take backup slides, rehearse fielding questions, and recall why he had been invited in the first place, because he knew what he was doing. How many times had he dreaded giving presentations? Every single time. And how many had actually gone poorly? None. What was he missing? He thought about how he was so intent on failure that he had not prepared for success.
As he turned his mind from imaginary catastrophes to realistic preparation, he gained confidence. By presentation day, he was serene. Not because nothing malfunctioned, but because he had anticipated how to react to whatever did. This is what the Buddha was talking about when he made the distinction between pain and suffering. Pain is life's inevitable arrows: illness, loss, struggle. Suffering is the extra second arrow, the narrative we construct upon pain. Villagers in constant readiness for floods which never arrived suffered more from their imagination than they ever would have suffered from actual water. Their resources, their rest, their tranquility were sucked out by specters. The Buddha taught that our mind is such a sky, huge, transparent, open. But our mental formations are like clouds. When fear prevails, the sky appears dark. The world appears menacing. But the immense sky of awareness is always there, always pristine behind the transient clouds. Zen reminds us, you are an aperture through which the universe is looking at itself. But when that window is veiled with fear, the universe perceives only threat. When it is clear, it perceives possibility, beauty, and expanse. This is not naivety. It is not denial of preparation. It is marking a line between wisdom and anxiety, between preparedness and fixity. It is relying on your capacity to greet life as it is, instead of burning yourself out with what may be. Jessica's tale brings this home. When she was diagnosed with a disease that needed ongoing monitoring, her thoughts ran to the worst possible future: aggressive cancer, unsuccessful treatments, leaving her children motherless. She grieved weeks ahead of time for a death that did not occur. And then her doctor told her, with careful watching, the condition was stable and could be managed. The majority of patients led long, healthy lives. The treatments were extremely successful. Jessica understood that the horror had not been from her condition, it had been from her mind. Her relief was not only in the favorable prognosis, but also in the realization she had been living in an entirely other reality than the one that was actually occurring. She had spun this terrible narrative of her own death that had no basis in medical reality. I was mourning a death that may never occur for decades, if ever. This is the sinister strength of phantom fears. They pretend to be fact because the sensation of fear is true. Even when the target of fear is wholly non-existent, the body cannot tell the difference. It reacts to illusions with the same intensity as it would to genuine danger. The heart rate accelerates, the muscles constrict, the flow of stress hormones pours. The nervous system goes on the attack, flee, or freeze. The tiger in the grass does not exist, but the tiger in the mind has already ignited the body. And yet the mind is not destined for this cycle. It may be trained. It can learn to distinguish. This was the Buddha's right understanding, a clear seeing that enables us to behold things as they actually are and not as our fears depict them. The exercise is kind, but radical. When you catch your mind spinning demon tales, hypothesizing catastrophes, practicing tragedies, you don't need to struggle with the fear or berate yourself for having it. Rather, you acknowledge it with kindness. Ah, here is my mind again, attempting to save me by fantasizing threats. Thank you, mind, for concern for my well-being. Now let's observe what actually is here. This simple shift transforms the relationship with fear. You don't push it away, but you also don't let it dictate reality. You honor its intention while refusing to bow to its illusions. Right understanding does not cancel out caution and preparation. Instead, it eliminates the draining rehearsal of crises that never come. It releases a vast reservoir of energy, energy to be used to create, to connect, to delight, and to respond wisely to the real crises that do come. There is a Zen story that brings this beautifully to mind. A farmer's horse escaped. "How awful! What bad luck!" said his neighbors. "Perhaps," the farmer answered. The following day, the horse came back, accompanied by 3 wild horses. "How great! What a stroke of luck!" the neighbors cried. "Perhaps," the farmer said. The day after that, the son of the farmer attempted to ride one of the wild horses and was thrown off, breaking his leg. "How horrible! Such bad luck!" the neighbors complained. "Perhaps," the farmer said. The week after that, soldiers visited to draft young men into war. Noticing the boy's fractured leg, they let him go. "How lucky! What a blessing!" the neighbors celebrated. "Perhaps," replied the farmer. The farmer's wisdom was not detachment. It was awareness. He did not hang on to fast judgments about good or bad, blessing or curse. He reacted rightly to each situation as it went down, but also wouldn't squander his life making up stories about what it was all about or where it would go. This parable uncovers a deep truth. Life is too complicated, too big, and too interconnected for our finite understanding to second-guess results. What we dread as disaster might unfold into possibility. What we honor as victory could be loaded with unseen difficulties. Attempting to forecast the long curve of events is as much use as an attempt to hold the wind in our cupped hands. The farmer's maybe was not laziness, it was wisdom. A wisdom grounded in reality and not in speculations regarding reality. And that leads us back to what the Buddha referred to as the 4th holy truth. The majority of storms never come. The majority of our worst fears are ghost fears, constructions of a mind that longs to protect us with everything, but constructs prisons rather than shelters. When we come to be able to distinguish between actual tigers and hypothetical ones, we cease to spend our lives fighting enemies that only exist in imagination. But there is something even more profound beneath this infinite practice of anticipating catastrophes that never occur. Why does the mind perform this act? Why are we so desperately attached to hypothetical situations, practicing worst-case scenarios, bearing the burden of 1,000 futures?
Usually, it isn't even about the disaster. It is about something deeper, our agonizing with uncertainty itself, the discomfort of not knowing, the lack of ability to control results regardless of how hard we plan, prepare, and fret. And that leads us to arguably the hardest truth of all, the one that lurks behind every phantom tiger, every fantasized storm, every sleepless night of worried thought. Let's explore that next. Control blocks the flow of faith. There was once a renowned river guide named Chen, a man whose reputation stretched across the mountain villages like the echo of rushing water. For 20 years, he had navigated the same set of treacherous rapids. He knew every bend, every hidden rock, every swirling current that could overturn the unwary. Visitors from far-off places traveled to ride with him, paying generously for the luxury of his experience. For them, Chen was not just a guide, a keeper of safety and a lord of control. Chen was a perfectionist. He read up on weather forecasts in advance, polished his raft until it shone, and drilled his clients with minute instructions. Paddle when I tell you to paddle. Stay still when I instruct you to do so. Leave nothing to chance. That was his mantra. Control, he thought, was the key to mastery. One spring, though, the mountain snow dissolved more quickly than anyone had anticipated. The river, normally volatile, now raged with a furious power Chen had never witnessed. Its face churned with concealed whirlpools. Its sound was like 1,000 drums. The majority of guides made excuses, but Chen's pride whispered to him, "I have overcome this river before. I will overcome it again." And so he embarked into the swollen current. Suddenly, he sensed the river's untamed power fighting every order. He shouted orders, his tone crisp with anxiety. His men paddled with ferocious intensity, tugging against the deluges. Chen pushed the raft through channels that had long been safe, to have them closed by surging waters. He attempted to muscle against the current, but each push only turned the raft more wildly. It crashed into rocks, developed leaks, and loaded the passengers with fear. What should have been an exciting ride turned into a nightmare of fear and fatigue. Stumbling onto land, the group was battered, traumatized, and disillusioned. Meanwhile, further downstream, a young guide named May faced the same raging waters. It was her first season. She had studied Chen's methods and admired his discipline, but standing at the edge of the swollen river, she felt something stir in her heart. This river is not here to be conquered, it is here to be trusted. When she launched, she didn't fight the water. She listened to it. She observed the way it swirled, leaned against its beat, and let its power bear her along. Where Chen struggled, May went. When the current pushed her raft towards a boulder, she did not resist. She let the energy throw her around it effortlessly. When the river tugged left, she went left. When it charged forward, she let go of its force. She did not try to control the river, but joined forces with it. By the trip's end, May's riders were laughing, thrilled, their cheeks flushed with wonder. They hadn't tamed the rapids, they'd danced with them. What they learned was not control, but communion with something greater than themselves. That evening, Chen sat beside the river, chastened and stunned. 20 years I have ferried this river, he breathed, and today it bested me. How could an apprentice triumph where I failed? He gazed into the water as moonlight rolled across the surface. The river glided smoothly around the rocks that had disrupted his raft's course. It did not struggle. It did not hold on. It discovered the opening, the line of least resistance, and flowed with absolute trust. And in that silence, Chen realized his failure was not the power of the river, but his own inability to let go. For 20 years, he had dominated the river as an adversary to be conquered, when all along it was a collaborator asking him to yield. This tale identifies one of the hardest realities of human existence. Our desperate grasping often prevents exactly the flow we yearn to feel. The tighter we hold on, the less there is space for wisdom, for spontaneity, or for grace. As does Chen, we confuse the steering wheel with the entire car, forgetting that the road, the weather, and the unseen forces of life also determine where we end up. The Buddha noted this tendency with great insight. He recognized that suffering rarely stems from events themselves, but from how we oppose them.
We fight rivers rather than learning to float with them. We wrestle with change rather than going with it. We tire ourselves attempting to bend life to our will when life is inviting us to trust, to listen, to flow. Our ongoing desire to control results, to shape how people react to us, and to control the timing of life tends to generate more rough weather than the problems themselves. Most of the storms we encounter are not created by situations, but by the pressure of fighting them. There's an old Zen parable about a student who went to his master in desperation. "Master," he said, "I try so desperately to be in charge of my thoughts, but they keep arising. I try to manage my emotions, but they keep shifting. I try to manage my life, but it keeps surprising me. What am I doing wrong?" The master took him to a window facing a serene garden. The wind was blowing softly through the trees, swaying branches and leaves in rhythm with its unseen stream. "Do you observe those trees attempting to dominate the wind?" the master inquired. "Of course not," the student said. "That would be impossible. And yet, see how lovely they dance with it. They bend without breaking, sway without falling, respond without resisting. That is the secret you are looking for. Not control, but responsive elegance."
The student scowled. "But surely I must be able to have some control over my life. Otherwise, what is the value of effort or intention?" The master smiled gently. "You do possess power, but not where you assume. You cannot order the wind, yet you can decide whether to stiffen against or to flow with it. You can decide the character of your response to what is given, though not what is given. You can sow seeds with attention, water them with patience, and cultivate the earth, yet not compel them to sprout or bloom on your timing. You can give love freely, but you cannot dictate how it is received. The skill is in being able to tell the difference, where your power really lies and where delusion of control only causes pain. This is the difference between control and influence. We have great influence over our internal state, our habits, our decisions, our reactions, and our development. But control, our control over outside results, over other people's decisions, over timing, or over the numerous invisible factors that govern our existence, that is significantly more constrained than we would like to believe. Take Maria, a conscientious project manager who brought her work ethic into every aspect of her life. She scripted every element with precision. Color-coded schedules for family events, meal spreadsheets, backup plans for backup plans. She was convinced that her work ethic would protect her from the randomness of life. But reality continued to refuse to comply. Children would become ill on key days, traffic would sabotage meetings in spite of her timely departures, unforeseen opportunities would arise that didn't fit her masterfully constructed timetable. The more tightly Maria planned, the more tenuous her peace was when life broke from her scenario. Her wake-up call was at her daughter's birthday party. Maria had planned every detail: the outdoor decorations, the order of games, the menu, even a minute-by-minute timetable to keep everything on track. But just as the party started, an unseasonable rainstorm drove everyone indoors. Maria, refusing to deviate from her plan, spent the whole celebration desperately attempting to recreate her outdoor idea in a cluttered living room. While her daughter and her friends, not concerned with the change, were laughing, playing games spontaneously, and enjoying the freedom of the moment, they didn't require Maria's flawless plan. They required her presence, her laughter, her engagement in their joy. But Maria was too preoccupied fighting the rain in her own imagination to dance with the moment ahead of her. At that moment, she understood the truth her master could have told her. Life does not compel us to rule it.
It compels us to join it, to flex like the trees, to flow like the river, to answer with grace rather than resistance. This is what the Buddha meant when he taught that attachment is the root of suffering. In Buddhist terms, attachment does not mean loving deeply or caring sincerely. It means clinging tightly to particular outcomes, insisting that life conform to our expectations, and suffering when it inevitably does not. There is a Zen koan story about a farmer who was so set on having the ideal crop that he undermined it with his own carefulness. Each night, worried about his seedlings' slow growth, he would enter the fields and pull on them in order to make them grow more quickly. Every morning, he found only that his plants wilted and their delicate roots bruised. Perplexed and dismayed, he asked himself how his passion was killing what he cherished most. Finally, a wise neighbor advised him, "Your plants do not require your strength, they require your trust. Sow good seeds, cultivate the soil, offer water and light, and then have faith in the process. Growth has a rhythm of its own. Worry cannot hasten it." This tale demonstrates the subtle but deep distinction between effort and force, between care and control. Effort and care flow with natural processes, going with the wisdom of timing. Force and control struggle against them, attempting to shape life to conform to the desires of our impatience. One fosters growth, the other smothers it. But why do we hold on so tightly? Why do we reach for mastery as if our life hangs in the balance? The Buddha taught that behind every urge for mastery is fear. Fear of loss, fear of pain, fear of uncertainty, fear of not being sufficient. Control looks to us like armor, protection against the unknown, a shield against the messiness of life. But here is the paradox. The armor becomes quickly the prison. The more that we constrict our grasp, the more rigid and constricted our experience. We lose potential surprises because they don't fit into our pre-scripted scenarios. We strain relationships because others won't follow the lines we've written for them. And we wear ourselves out, grappling with the irrepressible tide of change without end, thinking we can dam the river of impermanence with our own two hands. Another tale catches this reality with understated beauty. There was a tea master who was dedicated to the path of tea. He was fixated on perfecting the ceremony. Each movement had to be exact, each step learned by heart, each precision mastered. For decades he practiced, anticipating every conceivable deviation, refining his craft until it shone like machine-like perfection. One day, a respected Zen master visited to witness his ceremony. The tea master, eager to serve faultlessly in the presence of so great an honor, became flustered. His hands shook, he spilled water, he juggled the utensils incompetently. With every blunder, his frustration grew. In the end, he felt shattered, embarrassed. Bowing low, he said, "Forgive me, master. I have dishonored the way of tea with my clumsiness." The Zen master just smiled. "My dear friend, this was the most exquisite tea ceremony I have ever seen." The tea master was flabbergasted. "But master, it all went wrong. How could it be beautiful?" "Exactly because it went awry," answered the Zen master. Within your errors, you finally relaxed from attempting to control the ceremony and let it breathe. The spilled water became a part of its beauty. Your shaking hands expressed the fragility that makes the tea ceremony sacred. In releasing perfection, perfection manifested. This tale teaches a profound truth. Trying to control usually stifles the very beauty we wish to find. Perfection is not in unblemished action or mastery over every detail. It is achieved when we embrace life in its own terms, with grace and openness. Letting go of control allows authenticity to flourish. And there is this other Zen story that is the same. A master calligrapher spent years honing his brushwork. He was able to write the most beautiful characters,
each stroke measured in turn, each movement precisely balanced. His calligraphy was the envy of all for its control and precision, and yet people who examined it closely felt that something was wrong. The work was flawless, of course, but dead, like the flower placed between pages, lovely but without breath. One day, fate being what it is, the master was hurrying to complete a critical commission. In his haste, he carelessly spilled his inkstone. Black ink spilled over onto the spotless paper. He stood there for an instant, paralyzed. His reflex was to begin again, to throw away what was now destroyed. But then something a bit unusual awakened within him. Rather than fighting the accident, he allowed it to be a part of the artwork. He wet his brush and started moving his strokes through and around the spilled ink, letting freedom direct his hand. The outcome was something he had never created before. The characters moved with life. The smudges of ink, previously perceived as errors, now formed the soul of the work. His meticulous perfection was always dazzling, but this lived. It breathed, it sang. When questioned about this change, the master revealed, "Years I struggled to command my brush. Only when I let the brush command me did artistry flower. Beauty is not the offspring of perfect control, but of perfect trust."
This is the middle way, as the Buddha referred to it, the path which steers clear of the excesses of trying too hard and giving in, of pushing and drifting. It is the balance in which we act with diligence and caution, but let go of our demand for how things must be. The Buddha explained, attachment is the source, the cause of suffering. Therefore, it is the cause of suffering. But he also cautioned us that freedom is not indifference. We can love intensely without clinging. We can love richly without seeking to own. We can labor conscientiously without being mastered by outcome. Consider the contrast between two parents, the helicopter parent and the gardener parent. The helicopter parent hovers nervously, attempting to manage every aspect of their child's life, protecting them from all adversity, controlling every decision, insulating them from every failure. Motivated by love, though, this control tends to produce children who are anxious, overly dependent, and afraid of the world. The gardener parent, on the other hand, gives soil, sun, and water. They show guidance and protection as necessary, but leave the natural unrolling of their child's development. They know that kids, like plants, have their own timing and knowing. The outcome is usually children who are more resilient, self-assured, and able to handle life independently. The secret is recognizing what is ours and what is life's. You can control your effort, but not the outcome. You can control your response, but not the stimulus. You can control your preparation, but not the result. So how do we live this truth? How do we establish faith while releasing the handcuffs of control? First, practice the sphere of influence exercise. Draw 3 circles on a piece of paper. Inside the smallest circle, list everything you can control directly. Your words, your actions, your choices, your thoughts. Inside the middle circle, list everything you can influence but not control. Your habits of health, your workplace, your relationships. Inside the largest circle, list everything that is absolutely beyond your control. Aging, the weather, economic conditions, other people's decisions. Whenever tension increases, stop and query. Which circle does this fall into? If it falls into the outer circle, let it go. If it falls into the middle, seek wise influence without attachment. If it falls into the inner, act wholeheartedly. This simple practice can redirect your energy from futile resistance to empowered clarity. Second, practice what we can call the gardener's faith. She plants seeds, gives them water, provides soil and sun, and then she believes. She doesn't dig up the seeds every day to see if they've sprouted. She doesn't tug on the stems to get them to grow more quickly. She understands growth in its own secret timing. Apply this to your life.
In relationships, offer love, but don't demand certain responses. In work, give your best effort, but don't bind your worth to the results. In parenting, guide and protect, but don't strangle growth with control. Do your part with sincerity, then release the rest to life. Third, practice the open hand meditation. Sit quietly and bring to mind something you've been gripping too tightly, a situation, a person, a desired outcome. Imagine holding it in your closed fist. Feel the tension of that grasp, the effort, the fear, the exhaustion. Then slowly open your hand in your imagination. Let the palm rest open, spacious, ungrasping. Notice the sense of release, the relief that comes from no longer clutching. What you hold with open hands can still rest upon you, but without chains, without struggle. This is the essence of faith, not blind belief, but gentle trust in the flow of life. It is the wisdom of knowing, I will give what I can give, and I will meet what comes as it comes. Now slowly open your hand, carefully uncurling your fingers, and deposit whatever it is you are holding into the soft openness of your palm. Take time to notice the transition. Feel the subtle but deep difference between holding on tightly and holding with care, between control and support, between holding in fear and resting in trust. This mere bodily act is not just a gesture, it is a lesson in the body. It shows us what letting go feels like by way of touch. In your outstretched palm, the object is still safe, but unencumbered. You can still tend it, still cherish it, but you no longer smother it with fear. You provide it room to remain if it needs to, or to depart if it needs to. Real care does not confine. Real love gives permission. This is where the fourth practice comes from, building what psychologists refer to as response flexibility. This is the capacity to hesitate before responding, to enlarge the space between stimulus and response. Picture a situation when life goes awry, a plan falls through, a door slams shut, an expectation shatters. Our usual response is to push things back into our comfortable configuration, to pull the events onto the path we had set out for them. But what if you paused just a moment and asked yourself, what is this moment showing me? What secret gift is contained in this detour? What possibility is unfolding that I never would have selected on my own? Life tends to happen in paradoxes. The detour may bring you to a more stunning destination than the direct route. The error you once damned might hold within it an opportunity that rewrites your whole life. The test that once seemed insupportable might turn up an inner fortitude you didn't realize existed within you. There is an old Zen poem that addresses this enigmatic unfolding. Sitting quietly, doing nothing. Spring arrives and the grass grows on its own. These words do not imply sloth or passivity. They are an acknowledgement that not all things bloom on the orders of effort. Growth, healing, love, creativity, and wisdom, these energies go by a deeper rhythm, a sacred timing outside our calendars and clocks. Our task is not to over-direct these mysteries, but to prepare the fertile soil, the nurturing conditions, and then remove ourselves, trusting the invisible intelligence of life. Rebecca, the woman who lives to nurture her dementia-stricken mother into old age, learned this lesson the hard way. Her first response was to fill her heart with resolve. She read furiously, consumed every article, followed every medication with care, and attempted to predict and preempt every burst of confusion or terror. But dementia is a tide that cannot be controlled by the hand of human will.
The harder she struggled to dictate its path, the weaker, more defeated, and more broken-hearted she grew. No schedule could be controlled. No plan could hinder the inevitable march. At last, in the stillness of her own exhaustion of fighting, Rebecca let go. She ceased attempting to dictate the disease and opted instead to just be with her mother, out of love, out of presence, out of patience. Something beautiful happened in this change. Rather than fighting every symptom like an enemy,
she learned to dance with her mother's ever-changing reality. Rather than grieving who her mother once was, she learned to appreciate who her mother still was, right there in every passing moment. Then I understood, Rebecca thought, that I was so caught up holding on to the past, attempting to save what was escaping, that I was neglecting the present's gift. When I ceased managing and began trusting that every day would deliver what it would deliver, peace came upon us both. The disease itself didn't alter, but how we experienced it did. That altered everything. This is the gentle miracle of letting go of control. The world out there may not change in an instant, but your relationship to it does. What was once resistance yields to acceptance. What was once battle turns to flow. What was once draining you of energy now overflows with surprise grace. The Buddha instructed us that this shift from control to trust is not one large decision, but a daily habit. Life will challenge you over and over again, presenting small opportunities each day. Will you clench or let go? Will you push or let happen? Will you stay in fear or relax in trust? The practice starts with the very smallest of things. Let the traffic unfold at its own pace instead of raging against every red light. Let a conversation breathe, unfolding in its own rhythm, instead of trying to manipulate it toward your desired outcome. Trust your children enough to let them stumble, knowing their mistakes are part of their learning. These little acts of surrender create what the Buddha referred to as the muscle of faith, the consistent trust that life has its own wisdom and its own timing, wiser than yours. There is an old Zen legend about a young archery student. Anxious to become a master, he practiced day and night, attempting to dictate every tiny detail: his stance, his breathing, the direction of his bow, the pull of the string, the trajectory of the arrow in his mind. Mastery was control, he thought. But no matter how hard he worked, the target was usually out of reach. His arrows shot off, but they did not hit the center. The more he struggled to command every aspect of his practice, the angle of his arm, the tension in the bowstring, the trajectory of the arrow, the worse his shots grew. His need for perfection bred tension, and tension upset him. For weeks, the master watched in silence, observing his student struggle with accuracy and frustration. Finally, he emerged and spoke softly. "You are trying too hard to shoot the arrow. Cease trying to shoot the arrow. Allow the arrow to shoot itself." "Master, that doesn't make sense," the student said, flummoxed. "How can an arrow shoot itself?" In silence, the master answered. He picked up the bow with serene ease. His stance was firm, his breathing normal. When all was in place, the bow, the breath, the target, he simply let go. There was no tension, no pushing. The arrow sang through the air and hit squarely in the center of the target. "I don't control the arrow," he told him gently. "I position myself at the target. I let go with complete trust, and then I allow the arrow to go where it wants to go. Control creates tension, and tension misses the target. Trust generates flow, and flow hits the center effortlessly." The student started practicing again, but differently this time. Instead of micromanaging every aspect, he let go of trusting. He relaxed his hold, softened his thoughts, and released the arrow when harmony naturally occurred. Gradually, his precision came, but more than that, something amazing happened. Archery ceased to be a struggle and turned into a meditation. Every arrow turned into a guru, every release a lesson in release. The student understood that mastery lay not in controlling the result, but in developing the quality of presence in every moment of engagement. This is the fifth sacred truth. Control blocks flow of faith. As we hold on too tightly to outcomes, we generate resistance that gets in the way of life's natural unfolding. But when we trust, deeply, quietly, courageously, we open to flow, and within that flow, everything falls into place with grace. And here's something even more amazing. As you start to let go of control, you realize that releasing doesn't shrink you down, it grows you. It doesn't take away from your life, it opens it up, expanding the walls of potential well beyond what the controlling mind would have dreamed. That expansion brings us to the next lesson. Letting go makes space for growth. There was once a rich collector named Akira. The passion of his life had been the search for beauty. For decades, he had collected precious objects, precious scrolls penned by old calligraphers, fragile ceramics from far-off lands, glinting gemstones and paintings by great masters. His house had been turned into a museum of splendor. But Akira's treasures, while stunning, dominated his existence. He protected them vigilantly, putting in place elaborate locks, climate-controlled rooms, and glass encasements to maintain each piece. He dreaded the hand of visitors, the eye of burglars, even the breath of time itself. What had started with love of loveliness became an addiction to preservation. Every waking moment was spent on the upkeep of his treasures. One afternoon, an old monk stood at Akira's gate holding a simple wooden box. "I have something beautiful to show you, a gift that has brought happiness to many," the monk smiled. Akira looked around his cluttered halls, swimming in objects, and shook his head. "I have no room for anything new. Every shelf, every surface, every corner is filled. Maybe you should give your gift elsewhere, to someone who has space to accept it." The monk smiled gently. "Ah," he whispered, "but that is the very issue. You have packed your existence so full with what you already are that there is no space left for awe. You are encircled with treasures, yet trapped by them. In your plenty, you have become impoverished." "But these are valuable," Akira argued. "I slaved away to obtain them. I cannot just give them away." The monk set the wooden box on a nearby table and then slowly opened it. There was nothing inside but space. He looked at Akira with peaceful eyes and said, "This is the most precious treasure I possess. Empty space. Space for whatever can come. Space for surprise, for possibility, for growth, for new beauty. Your collection is wonderful, yes, but it has taken your space for the sacred unknown." Akira peered into the hollow of the box. In that stillness, he saw the reality. His passion for preservation had turned into a prison. His concern had transformed into holding on. His valuables, rather than emancipating him, had quietly spun chains into his existence. And this is the crux of the teaching, that which we hold dearest is usually what holds us back. What we define as security is perhaps the very thing that hinders us from growing. What we guard may be what holds us back from receiving.
Our worries, cunningly attired in the robes of care and protection, silently narrow our world. What starts as watching over becomes gradually a cage, until we are living in a lovely prison of our own creation. Reflect for a moment on how worry works in your own life. When your mind is filled with worry about losing your job, how much space is left in your mind for considering other possibilities or learning new things? When you are fretting about a relationship issue, how much spirit is left over to really cultivate the relationship, to hear profoundly, or to give love with receptivity? When your focus is fixated on defending what you already possess, how much room remains to learn what you may yet become? Anxiety has an odd property. It makes us feel engaged, even vital, while in reality, it is utterly pointless. It creates the illusion of control, as though going over events in our heads or clenching our fists harder will somehow keep us from harm. But like Akira's complex defense mechanisms, worry tends to ward off nothing and shut us out from everything. We are so busy keeping our defenses up that we are denied the liberty to discover what exists outside of them. Buddha witnessed this pattern with remarkable clarity. He instructed human beings that they commonly confuse clinging with caring, hoarding with security, and control with love. These, however, are imitations of the real thing. True caring calls for openness. Real security does not come from walls, but from trust within. Real love cannot be suffocated. It must have space to breathe, to grow, to surprise. All of them need space. space for growth, for change, for the unexpected and unknown. There is a Zen parable that demonstrates this reality. Once, a student came to his master's door with a large pack on his back, containing all his material goods. His face was contorted, his shoulders hunched under the load. "Master," he declared, "I wish to study wisdom, but I am unable to let go of these items. They are my security, my ego, the product of my life's labor. Without them, I would be nothing." The master took him to a window that faced a garden, where an enormous oak tree stood firm and rooted. "Look at that tree," the master requested. "Yes," answered the student quietly. "It is strong and beautiful. Each fall," the master said, "that tree releases its leaves. They dry out, drop off, and nourish the earth. And in spring, new growth springs forth, fresh and green. If the tree held on tight to the leaves of last year, it would choke out its own life. But the tree has faith. It understands that releasing frees room for renewal." The student scowled. "But master, my belongings are not as easily replenished as leaves. If once I release them, they will never grow again." The master smiled kindly. "You are right. Your possessions may not come back, but something much more valuable will be born. Space. Space for new experiences, new friendships, new understanding and possibilities. Without emptiness, nothing new can enter. A cup already filled to the top cannot take in even a drop of tea." This instruction does not require us to discard all that we hold dear, nor live carelessly without regard. It is more that it calls us to look at what we hold and how firmly we clutch it. Does what we cling to benefit our growth, or does it quietly constrain it? Are we genuinely nurturing what is of value, or are we so concerned with guarding what we have that we have forgotten how to genuinely live? Take Elena, a talented artist who spent years mastering a specific technique of painting. She was modestly successful. She had a familiar method, a niche but consistent following, and a stable routine in her studio practice. In the outside world, it seemed normal. But within, the sparks of her creative passion began to fade. An interior restlessness hummed within her, a summons to find new modes, to try her hand at sculpture, digital art, even forceful mixed media techniques. But every time she thought about branching out beyond her tried and true means, fear stood like a barricade. "Suppose my new work is not as well," she wondered. "Suppose my readers don't like my change. Suppose I lose the small income this style generates." So, year after year, she painted just the same. Each canvas technically sound, every brushstroke known, but the flame that had once kindled her passion for art was dwindling. Like Akira in his House of Treasures, Elena was a preserver of what she had already made, a defender of her proven self as an artist, but with no place for what wanted to be born through her. Her break occurred suddenly when she was speaking with a child at one of her shows. The child cocked her head, looked at her painting for a long time, and inquired innocently, "Why do you always paint the same way? Don't you want to try something different?" The simplicity of the question cut through Elena's guarded defenses. In that instant, she saw what her fear had been keeping from her. She was holding on to her identity as the artist who paints this way so desperately that she had ceased to grow as an artist at all. She had been guarding her leaves well beyond their season, and by doing so had shut herself off to spring. Her fear of losing what she already had was quietly keeping her from finding out what she could still be. It was as if the walls she had erected to keep her success safe had also become the cell that entombed her creativity. With great courage, Elena started to loosen her grasp. She began to explore new shapes, new styles, and new materials that at first made her feel awkward in her hands. Some of them failed,
sometimes so flamboyantly that she could not even resist laughing. Some of her devoted fans watched in confusion, wondering about her transformation, wondering why she would jeopardize her reputation when she had already arrived. She did indeed face real financial insecurity for a while, times when she questioned if she had made the wrong decision. But by moving outside the security of her created identity, by releasing her obligation to be perpetually Elena the painter, she found something much greater, that she could be Elena, a creative soul without confines, who could follow whatever beckoned to her heart. Her art no longer had to be contained within the tidy box she once held onto. She could experiment, play, and express in new dimensions. I realized that I had been in a tiny version of myself, Elena said, not because the world was confining me, but because I was confining myself in fear of losing what I already had. Once I let go of that fear, I found there was so much more ahead of me than I could ever have dreamed. This is what the Buddha was saying when he instructed that attachment brings suffering. Not attachment that arises from true compassion or love, but attachment that clings and grasps, the desperate holding on that clenches our fists around what we already have. Our fists close so tightly that we are unable to accept what life is seeking to put into them. There is a Zen teaching anecdote about a monkey that found a jar with a small opening full of nuts. The monkey could simply put its hand in and snatch a fistful, but when the fist was full, it was too big to withdraw. Liberty was only in release away. The monkey just needed to have let go some of the nuts and withdrawn its hand. But blinded with greed and gullibility, it would not let its prize go. The hunters realized this weakness in the monkey's character, so they bound jars to trees and waited. The monkeys, trapped by their unwillingness to give up, caught themselves. This isn't merely a tale of monkeys. It's a reflection held up to the human experience. How many times do we remain stuck in work, relationships, or habits that no longer serve us, merely because we refuse to release what we've already put in? How many times do we hang on to outdated successes, worn-out selves, or bygone identities, afraid to step into something else? The Buddha himself once said, "In the end, just 3 things matter: how well we have lived, how well we have loved, and how well we have learned to let go." These words indicate the intimate link between letting go and living. Letting go does not equate with coldness or indifference. It is not detachment in the form of indifference. Rather, it is about creating spaciousness, allowing life to flow through us without obstruction, allowing love to breathe freely, allowing creativity to flourish without fear. The paradox is ironic. The more we grasp at life, the more we feel dead. The more we grasp at love, the less we truly experience it. The more we grasp at a static identity, the less we are living. To let go is not to lose what we value. It is to make space for what we value most to flourish. Marcus learned this truth the hard way. For years, he was successful as an individual contributor and was then promoted to a leadership role in his company. His pride had always been in his independent knowledge and his ability to accomplish tasks on his own. But this new position was different. It called for leading teams, delegating authority, and putting his faith in other people's capabilities. Marcus didn't want to do it. He attempted to bring his old approach to work with him into his new role. He would delegate tasks, but then micromanage every aspect of them. He would go to team meetings, but still want to be the expert in every discussion. He would encourage teamwork, but in secret belief he could do most things better himself. The consequence was inevitable: burnout for Marcus and exasperation for his team. Caught between 2 worlds, he refused to relinquish his former self as single expert and was trying to adopt his new self as a leader. As with the monkey in the jar, Marcus had imprisoned himself through clinging, blind to the fact that liberty, trust, and expansion were all on the other side of letting go. Marcus's change started with a painful recognition. He had to make a choice. He could be the brightest mind in the room, or he could develop into a good leader, but not both at the same time. His former self conflicted with his new role.
The instant he relaxed his hold on always being the one in control, there was created within him an opening, a space for himself to become something much more precious. Not the brightest one, but the one who facilitated others to find their own brightness. It was scary to let go of the need to be right about everything, Marcus conceded. But once I finally opened up space for other people's experience, I learned that leadership wasn't about knowing all the answers. It was about asking more skillful questions and setting up the context for others to thrive. This evolution did not arrive in one leap. It did not happen all at once. It was a slow, measured practice of what might be termed sacred letting go. The active release of identities, expectations, and patterns that had previously served a function but were now barriers. Letting go here was not about losing who he was. It was about creating space to become who he might be. So how do we actually practice this holy art of release in our own lives? Let's take a look at some rituals that make letting go from an ethereal concept, a living, breathing habit. The empty cup ritual. Every morning, grab a cup, a regular cup, and hold it in your hands. Consider this Zen wisdom. A cup is most helpful when it is empty. Ask yourself, what am I filling myself with that does not leave space for what today wishes to bring me? What assumptions, fears, or fixed ideas am I carrying that keep me closed off? By beginning your day in this reflection, you generate the openness to be surprised, to let life fill your cup with something new. A weekly inventory of grip. Take a few minutes every week to be truthful with yourself about what you're holding on to. Ask yourself, what image of myself am I holding on to that prevents me from growing? What resentments am I hanging on to that keep me from new connections? What results am I holding on to so tightly that I'm not seeing new possibilities? Naming what you hold, you break its grip on you. Awareness itself is a release. Self-conscious release via ritual. At other times, letting go must be physical. On a piece of paper, write out something you are willing to let go of. A fear, a label, a painful memory. Burn it, bury it, or let it go in flowing water. As you do, say, I let go of this in thanks for the ways it has helped me. I now make room for what wants to be born. This practice respects the past without leaving you attached. Sacred letting go is not about giving up on everything or being complacent. It is not about rejecting love or withholding care. It is really about discovering the difference between healthy attachment and desperate clinging. You can care passionately without attempting to own the ones you care about. You can commit yourself to your work without being a slave to results. You can celebrate your past without being trapped by it. A Zen poem gets across this balance so well. Hold everything lightly, including your views on holding everything lightly. The more tightly you hold, the more gets away from you. The more lightly you hold, the more solidly it stays in your keeping. The insight here is deep. Real security is not found in holding on so tightly, but in building trust in your own strength, the assurance that whatever arrives, you can handle it. Real love is not born of control, but of establishing room for others to be who they are. Real success is not found in hanging on to success, but in remaining receptive to development, transformation, and rebirth. Imagine the contrast between a closed fist and an open palm. A closed fist is able to grasp that which it has, but not able to receive anything else. An open palm, however, can hold tenderly and remain poised for new presence. The open palm is a living metaphor of how to get through life, involved but not clinging, loving but not controlling, committed but not fixed. Jennifer learned this truth from her relationship with her adult daughter. She had in her heart a very vivid picture of what she believed would make her daughter happy: a steady job, the good relationship, a predictable life. In love, she offered advice, sent along employment listings, and cautioned about decisions she believed would be detrimental. She intended the best, but her love got mixed up with control.
The more Jennifer attempted to mold her daughter's way, the more space existed between them. Her daughter started sharing less, visiting less, and forging her own way in ways that appeared to resist her mother's counsel. What Jennifer perceived as direction was being received as interference. Her love, shrouded within the suffocating tightness of control, was sending away the individual she wanted to bring nearer. The violinists started to respond naturally to the cellos. The woodwinds were attentive to the brass. The percussionist, no longer waiting for a visual signal, let his sense of rhythm direct him in harmony with the others. What resulted was not chaos, but much richer than Yamamoto had ever hoped for. Music that was alive, breathing, full of dialogue between instruments instead of commands from the podium. As he remained seated, remaining motionless, Yamamoto experienced an epiphany unfold inside him. For years, he had thought that control was where beauty originated, order the key to greatness. And yet here, in his absence, the music told him something different. Beauty does not simply spring from control, but from trust. Harmony ensues when every voice gets room to hear, to respond, and to be itself. As the last chorus rang out in the hall, Yamamoto had tears streaming down his face. The Ninth Symphony had never been so human, so divine, so free. In that moment, he realized what all those years of discipline and mastery had kept him from grasping. Life does not run through control. Life runs when you get out of the way. After that, Maestro Yamamoto's conducting was different. His movements grew lighter, more like invitations rather than orders. He formed the onset of phrases, but let their conclusions be borne by the musicians. He directed, but he no longer held on to them. Critics who had previously admired his accuracy now wrote of something different. His performances now contained warmth, unpredictability, and a touch of magic lacking previously. When asked what he had done differently, Yamamoto merely smiled and replied, "I stopped trying to own the music. I began letting the music own me." This parable, along with Jennifer's open hands and Marcus's leadership, speaks to the same eternal truth. The most profound beauty of life is uncovered not through control, but through spaciousness. The tighter we grip, the more life pushes back. The more lightly we grasp, the more life passes through us in ways we could never have planned for ourselves. This is the last paradox of surrendering. What is perceived as surrendering is empowerment. What is perceived as loss is freedom. What is perceived as moving away is actually moving into harmony with the larger rhythm of life. Buddha termed this non-grasping, the capacity to be without clinging, without forcing. It isn't passivity, it isn't indifference. It is dancing with life instead of attempting to cage it. It is walking with open palms instead of closed fists. It is, as Yamamoto found, that when we cease grasping to manipulate the symphony of life, the music of life does at last play through us. So the sixth sacred truth echoes clearly. Letting go creates space for growth, not only for ourselves, but for everything we touch. And the seventh truth arises naturally from it. Life flows when you step aside.
Each day, we are presented with the decision: hold on or let go, push or believe, control or flow. And each time we opt to release, we don't lose, grow. We become greater than our fears, more liberated than our identity, and more fully alive than we ever knew. Reflect upon how this can be applied to the difficulties you are experiencing now. Maybe there's a relationship you've been attempting to control into balance. Maybe there is a work path you've been clinging to in dread of losing what you've accomplished. Maybe there is a vision you've been pushing rather than letting it happen. What if, like Yamamoto, you stepped out of the way, not in abandonment, but in faith? What if you made room for the natural intelligence of life to flow through you, leading you to results your mind could never have designed?
This is the heart of the last truth. Life goes most smoothly when you learn to step aside. Not from effort, not from care, not from responsibility, but from the draining illusion that you have to control everything in order for it to go right. When you let go of holding so hard, you see that life has always been flowing, always been carrying you along, just as the river bears the boat, just as the seasons bear the trees, just as breath bears the body without your agency. The call is easy. Trust the current. Play your role with awareness. Give your care without attachment. Act with integrity, but let go of the need for control. And in releasing the need to control, you'll find the biggest paradox of all. Letting go doesn't make you weak, it makes you expansive. Releasing outcomes doesn't make you empty, it makes you available. Stepping aside doesn't take you out of life, it finally lets you enter life. This is what the Buddha came to understand beneath the Bodhi tree. This is what Yamamoto uncovered in the stillness of his orchestra. This is what all Zen tales whisper underneath their words. When you relinquish control, life discloses its music. And within that music, you are not the conductor, you are both the player and the listener, both the song and the quiet, both the question and the response. So, breathe. Release your hand. Have faith in the rhythm that has ever supported you, and let yourself flow. That challenging relationship you've been attempting to repair with brute force and determination, what if you weren't so busy trying to shape the other person into your concept of who they ought to be, and instead focused inward, becoming more genuinely yourself? That career dilemma you've been clinging to with determination and bending into submission, what if you channeled your energy into delivering your best work with integrity and then let the natural process of accolades and opportunity happen on its own? That nervousness you've been fighting every single day, what might change if, rather than pushing against it like an adversary, you merely let it be while you gently returned your awareness to the current moment? Maria found this truth in the sweet battle of mothering her teenage son. For years, she had controlled every aspect of his school life, checking homework, calling teachers, hiring tutors, monitoring each grade and deadline as if her watchfulness alone could ensure his success. But the more she tried to control, the more he fought back. He pulled away, became resentful, and retreated into passivity. Her good intentions, wrapped in control, were unwittingly stifling his own development. Then one day, Maria decided to let go. She ceased micromanaging his coursework and instead quietly placed herself at his disposal for assistance whenever he needed it. To her amazement, something miraculous happened. Released from the burden of her incessant intervention, her son started taking charge of his own education. His grades didn't shoot skyward overnight, but something more profound started stirring within him. His curiosity. He was asking questions that concerned him, studying topics that interested him, and started developing the inner drive that no amount of outside management could have instilled. I realized, Maria said, that by working so hard to make him successful, I was inadvertently keeping him from learning how to be successful in the first place. When I backed off, his true abilities finally had room to come through. This is the paradox of wisdom traditions. The tighter we cling to life, the tighter it pushes back. The more we let go in trust, respecting life's own smarts and cooperating with its natural cycles, the more it carries us toward our deepest longings. Another tale is told by Robert, an entrepreneur swept up in the constant rush. For years, he strained himself with long days of promotion stunts, pushy pricing tactics, and desperate networking. He was burned out, working 18-hour days, sacrificing quality time with his family, and losing his health along the way. And for all the energy he exerted, his company was stuck, like dirt packed too hard for seeds to germinate. His moment of epiphany was when he was questioned by a mentor who asked a question that cut through his assumptions. What if instead of pursuing customers, you became the kind of business customers naturally want to find? That one question changed everything for Robert.
He ceased to pursue every conceivable lead and started cultivating the relationships he already possessed. Rather than competing on price, he competed on care, excellence, and real value. Rather than running towards mythical growth goals, he slowed down sufficiently to build enduring systems and a healthy rhythm. The outcome was revolutionary. People started sending his way not because of brilliant marketing, but because of confidence and satisfaction. His reputation increased consistently as he decided to do fewer things but excel at them. With Robert regaining balance in his life, his creativity and energy levels improved, enabling him to make more informed decisions. "I discovered," Robert said, "that my business didn't need me to push it endlessly. It needed me to create the right conditions for success to grow naturally. One path left me depleted while keeping me stuck. The other nourished me while creating growth that could last."
This is what the Buddha had in mind when he mentioned non-interference. It is not inaction or indifference. It is not passivity. It is the skill of knowing when effort is beneficial to growth and when effort is interfering, when action is harmonious with the natural development of life, and when action destroys it. Real wisdom is in this difference, to act from the heart where it counts and to withdraw where control obstructs the flow. It's about mastering the fine dance of life, knowing when to act and when to let go, when to talk and when to listen, when to lead and when to simply have faith. The Buddha taught that a great deal of human suffering is the result of what he referred to as the wanting mind, that agitated portion of ourselves that insistively demands this moment be other than it is. We want the traffic to flow more quickly. We want others to behave in the way we think they should. We want our feelings to always be comfortable, our situations convenient, our ways uncomplicated. This endless push against reality creates a friction that grinds us down. It drains our energy while rarely improving anything. It's like trying to row against a river's current. You exhaust yourself, yet move nowhere. But something changes the moment you start to work with reality instead of against it. When you move aside from the ego's constant need to control everything, you begin to realize something miraculous. Life itself has an intelligence. There is a flow of aliveness running through every situation. You don't have to create it. You just need to get in flow with it. And when you do, life becomes less of a struggle and more of a dance. Here are some practical tips on how to maintain this alignment in everyday life. First, cultivate situational awareness. Stop before you leap. Breathe. Tune in to the natural rhythm of what's happening. Check in with yourself. What's the timing here? What's already unfolding on its own? How can I assist what wants to unfold rather than pushing what's not yet ready? This awareness makes struggle become synchronicity. Second, practice responsive presence. Step into situations not with a fixed agenda, but with openness. Listen more than you speak. Watch before acting. Let your actions emerge not from habit or anxiety, but from authentic response to the needs of the moment. This is how wisdom sounds through you. Third, trust the process of unfolding. Trust is not passivity. It's not abdicating responsibility. It is instead doing your work diligently and then trusting in the rest to figure itself out in due time. Sow seeds, water them religiously, and then let the miracle of germination work its only power. The tree does not grow more quickly by your anxiety. Fourth, learn the difference between resistance and boundaries. When something isn't working despite good faith effort, it doesn't necessarily need more force. Maybe it needs patience. Maybe it needs a change in approach. Maybe it's just not your way. Sometimes the strongest act is the act of not acting. There is a Zen parable that illustrates this to perfection. One student asked his master, "What is the way?" The master responded, "When you are hungry, eat. When you are fatigued, rest. When you walk, simply walk." The student scowled. "But master, everyone does these things. What's so great about that?" The master smiled. "When most people are eating, their mind is working 1,000 miles an hour thinking about work. When they are resting, they are working 1,000 miles an hour worrying about tomorrow. When they walk, they are already there in thought." Few human beings ever manage to really be anywhere they are, doing what they are doing with whole presence. This, my student, is the way. This is the value of stepping aside. Not stepping back from life, but stepping aside from the restless chatter of the mind. Laying down the compulsion to control and perfect and manage every instant. Here you encounter life as it is and realize that as it is already sufficient. Be in the conversation when you're in conversation. Just work when you work. Just love when you love. Rest when you rest. This simple being is more powerful than all strategies and concerns altogether. Consider parenting. A parent who resists the urge to choreograph each step of their child provides that child with the invaluable gift of space, the space to stumble, to learn, to become resilient, and to find their own genuine way. Real guidance is not control, but care encased in trust. Or consider creativity. The author who ceases to grasp at every word finds that most radiant sentences are those that flow through them naturally, without strain, like water over stones. The artist who lets go of perfection enables something to happen that is beautiful and unexpected, something even they were not able to orchestrate. In parenting, in art, in work, in love, it is the same. Presence, trust, and allowing open the door to a wisdom far greater than the mind's restless effort. Even in leadership, this truth shines clearly. Leaders who step aside from the ego's hunger to always be right discover something remarkable. Their teams flourish. Innovation begins to blossom. Collaboration deepens, and effectiveness grows naturally. Such leaders understand their actual function is not to provide all the answers, but to provide fertile soil in which the greatest answers will emerge from the collective knowledge of the group. The best leaders are gardeners of possibility, not managers of solutions. This is what the Buddha finally discovered in his enlightenment. You are not apart from life, outside of it, attempting to manipulate it. You are life, expressing itself in this particular manifestation in this very moment. When you realize this reality, when you no longer interrupt your own inner knowing and let it stream freely, you find that life itself shows its simplicity and its wonder. The 7 sacred truths we've explored together are not abstract teachings to store in the mind like trinkets on a shelf. They are living invitations, doorways into a completely different way of being in the world. A way of being that is both more relaxed and more effective, more trusting and more skillful, more open yet more deeply grounded.
And as you make ready to step back into the rhythms of your own life with these teachings in hand, keep this in mind. Transformation is not a single thunderbolt. It's not about suddenly becoming wonderfully enlightened by tomorrow morning. Transformation is a gradual unfolding as dawn spreads across the horizon. It occurs moment by moment, decision by decision, breath by breath. You don't have to change everything simultaneously. You simply must recall over and over again that in each moment you have a choice of where to put your attention, a choice of how to react, a choice of whether to push or to let go. Whenever fear surfaces,
You can remind yourself that you are the gardener of your own mind. You can't keep out every seed from blowing in, but you can decide which ones to nurture. Whenever you catch yourself wanting to force or control, you can recall the lesson of bamboo. Its power is not in resistance, but in yielding, bending elegantly with the wind. Every time anxiety sweeps you into tomorrow, you can ground yourself back into the present, the only place peace ever is. Every time you catch yourself getting ready indefinitely for storms that never arrive, you can kindly redirect your energy toward cultivating the ground beneath your feet. Every time control's grip clenches tighter, you can let go of your hands and recall that trust makes room for results beyond greater than your designs could have envisioned. Every time you find yourself hanging on, you can experiment with letting go, focusing on the fact that fresh growth is always in need of space to appear. And every time you feel tired from the impossibility of in control of every detail of life, you can exhale and recall the loveliest symphonies are created not out of control, but out of getting out of the way, allowing life to play itself through you. This practice is not an endpoint to be arrived at once and clung to forever. It is a rhythm, a returning, a remembering. Each return, your understanding is greater. Each remembering, the practice is lighter, more natural, more alive. Each moment is a new chance. Flow over force, trust over control, presence over anxiety. The last words of the Buddha before he departed this life were simple and profound. Work out your salvation with diligence. Observe the words used, not bend over backward to be happy, not dictate your route to peace, but work diligently, work steadily, work patiently, work with gentleness toward yourself, and above all, work with faith. Faith that the process of enlightenment, like a seed pushing through the earth, occurs in its own time. You already possess all you need. Not all the things the mind demands you to have, not all the things the world advises you to want, but all that you actually need to take the next step, to answer this instant in a wise way, to believe the stream of your unrolling life. And as you bring these teachings along, keep in mind you are not the first to walk this way of forgetting and remembering, of holding on and letting go, of falling and rising again. You are walking it now, step by step, with all beings who are gradually mastering the art of living in harmony with life itself. Somewhere on the planet, right this instant, someone is opting for peace rather than fear. Someone is being taught to flex like bamboo, never breaking. Someone is bringing back their strayed focus to the silence of the present moment. Someone is stepping out of control, placing faith in the quiet intelligence of life itself. And in that decision, no matter how minute, a ripple effect of awakening ripples outward. Because each act of peace, each breath of trust, each release adds to the great shift of this world. Your peace feeds the peace in others. Your trust allows others to trust. Your gentleness becomes a ripple that touches shores you might never see. Walk gently now. Trust with depth. Step aside when life wishes to flow through you, and this remember, the deepest transformations barely come as thunderclaps. They come unseen as dawn creeps into night, through the steady beat of unremarkable decisions. To let go rather than grip, to trust rather than fear, to stay present rather than lost in tomorrow. The river of your life already knows the way. Your job is not to dictate its destination, but to journey with openness, to wonder at the landscape,
to feel the water propelling you toward horizons you can't yet envision. The current is wise. The current is vast. The current is home. Welcome then to the sacred flow of your life. Welcome home to yourself.